Wait, no, wait. Yeah, we're up. Yeah, we're going to pick. Okay. All right. Thanks, man. Yeah, we're going to play, Steve. All right. Later. All right. Got it. All right. Adam Peters. Let him cook.
That was from Commander's Log, the video series that the team puts out on its social media pages and its YouTube. Think of it as like a very team-friendly Hard Knocks. This is the Kevin Sheehan Show. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin on Thursday and Friday. Kevin is back on Monday. What you heard in that clip was Dan Quinn being just like us. He is, in fact, like us.
One of us.
Saying, let Adam Peters cook.
Get in the kitchen.
I love it when the memes of the internet make its way into the front office, but I say that with the purest of intentions, because I do think that it is funny that everyone is adapting this idea of let Adam Peters cook. I like Commander's Log, and there's a lot of stuff we're going to get into. We will cycle back to this eventually. I'd love Commander's Log. If you are excited about Hard Knocks, you should be watching the Commander's Log. I think the social team does a really good job. There's a part that we're going to play later in the show, Max, that had me ready to run through a wall. I saw it. It was from Josh Connerly, and I was like, can it be July now? Forget June. Forget like the 4th of July. Give me training camp. Give me preseason. I'm ready to go. So you will hear that throughout the course of the show. We got 3 great guests coming up. Jordan Dejani is going to join us in an hour to talk all the latest headlines in the NFL. Mark Zuckerman is going to be with us. He's live in Seattle. The Nats got a big win last night, absolutely shredding the Seattle Mariners. And then Sheehan Jayaraja from CBS Sports is going to be with us to talk about the future of college football. If you're a fan of the sport and you are paying attention to any of the headlines that are coming out of Destin where the SEC meetings are taking place, we have a lot of changes that are coming to the sport that I love, and I know there's a lot of listeners that love college football. So the latest on that at noon. But we start with arguably the biggest story that we can in late May. Jalen Ramsey yesterday strung together a string of tweets effectively saying goodbye to Miami. Maybe I'm reading a little bit too between the lines with this, but when he says I'm ready for the next chapter, I don't think he means the 2025 season. I think what he means is that he does not want to be in Miami anymore. And Jalen Ramsey has been tied to Washington through various reports during this 2025 offseason. Now that feels a little bit more open to realistically happening with him firing these tweets off. Now, I do want to point out, it is very important for those of us that are fans of the team just to pay attention to who is tweeting reports about the Commanders being interested. It's a lot of national people, which is fine. I think national people do a very good job. But I would just like to, and I'm not going to name anyone in particular, but I just want to point out, when it comes to people that are linking Washington to a guy like Jalen Ramsey, this front office does not talk to these people. Or maybe they talk to these people, but they don't talk to these people the way that Ron talked to these people. Ron Rivera would give you the first 15 scripted plays if you really asked for it. This front office does not do that. So when you see reports from guys on ESPN, on CBS, Fox, whoever, it's not just one person. It's the litany of all of the national reporters. They don't get a lot of clarity from this front office group. So just keep that in mind when it comes to the Jalen Ramsey stuff. I, though, Max, in sitting and thinking about this, I have discovered exactly how I would want if Washington goes and makes Jalen Ramsey a Commander. I have discovered exactly how I want this to go down.
Oh, yeah?
If it's via trade, which at this point it would have to be. It would have to be via trade. That's the best thing for Miami. He wants out of Miami. Miami clearly wants out of him. Contract situation is going to be tough, but if it's a post-June 1 trade, it does become a little bit easier. A little bit easier. Not a lot of it easier, but a little bit easier. Just for context, if they were to release Jalen Ramsey before June 1st, which is today, tomorrow, the day after that, and that's it. So if it's just the next 3 days, the dead cap hit is $49 million. So they are not going to be doing that.
No.
He is not going to be getting released before June 1st. If it is after June 1st, that dead cap in a release for 2025 goes down to $30 million. Better, I guess, still not great. If it's a trade, the dead cap pre-June 1st is $29 million for Miami. If it's post-June 1st, it is going to be $10 million. So that seems easy, right? You don't have to be a math major to know that $10 million is clearly the best option of that. So I say this to say, if you are going to trade for Jalen Ramsey, I'm not on board with that, if I'm being honest. But if you are going to, I will play the devil's advocate. If you're going to trade for Jalen Ramsey, you are trading Marshawn Lattimore as a part of that trade.
As you were building up to it, I was like, is he going to say?
He's going to say it. If you trade for Jalen Ramsey, Marshawn Lattimore is a part of that trade.
I don't hate it.
You do not need to stack a guy in Marshawn Lattimore who is not at OTAs yesterday. I don't love that. Don't hate it. It's voluntary. I get it. But I don't love when a guy who did not perform great last year, especially in the postseason, is not at OTAs, at least yesterday. We will see if he is there today. I cannot imagine that he will be there today unless someone said that yesterday and I missed it. I listened to everybody.
I haven't seen any of it.
Have not seen a report that said he just missed Wednesday. He'll be here Thursday. So I'm not expecting to see him there. If he is there, I will change my tune. But if you have Marshawn Lattimore, who was not good at the end of the year last year, and he's not showing up, I do feel like that makes him a little bit more expendable, especially if you really, really love Jalen Ramsey. I want a defensive pass rusher. Let me make that abundantly clear. And it is actually starting to make me very upset that there has not been a defensive pass rusher that has been acquired that I can put a lot of faith in. But if you want to go for Jalen Ramsey, you trade Marshawn Lattimore. I do not think you can spend the assets and then the money to then trot out Lattimore, Ramsey, and then decide between Sanderstill and Trey Amos, and then one of those dudes is riding the bench. Mikey Sanderstill is too good to be riding the bench right now. After what we saw last year, the way that he played against A.J. Brown, the way that he played against Detroit, the way that he played against everybody, even when Lattimore wasn't doing great with Mike Evans, who stepped up to the matchup? It was Mikey Sanderstill. That dude would play really well against guys that had at least 6 inches of height on him. Didn't seem to matter. I do not think you can have Mikey Sanderstill ride the bench, but then I also would be very confused if you draft this guy, Trey Amos, who, as I watched Commanders log yesterday, they love Trey Amos. They love him. Now, I understand the Commanders log bit. You are not going to put a video or clip in there of guys being like, damn it, I hate that we have to pick him, but we're going to pick him. What they did show was that there were guys that were calling. They didn't tell us who, but there were teams that were calling for that pick.
Some hints.
They gave some hints, I think, for the first one. I don't know if they gave hints for the second one.
There if you do some diving, there were initials thrown out there. There was there
was first names, but there wasn't.
He made a joke about the in-division tax. I don't know if that was to
Howie
Roseman,
but that was to Howie. I don't know if that was to Howie Roseman or if that was to the Giants.
Yeah, because that was a different call.
Because the Giants traded up to then go get Jackson Dart. That was when they were talking about getting Connerly.
Yeah.
But they decided to not go to trade out of that second round spot to draft Trey Amos. I cannot wrap my head around doing that, thinking that Trey Amos and Mikey Sanderstill would likely be your guys of the future in the cornerback position when eventually Marcus Lattimore or Marshawn Lattimore is done. And then when eventually, if you get Jalen Ramsey is done, you have those two guys hopefully on the back end of your defense to be the guys moving forward. You would then put one of them on the bench if you go out and you get Jalen Ramsey and you keep Marshawn Lattimore. So if you want Jalen Ramsey and you want to trade for Jalen Ramsey, you trade Marshawn Lattimore. And your thought is, all right, we will give you Marshawn Lattimore. That is an expiring contract. The Dolphins are not going to be very good this year. They are going to lie to themselves and say we are going to be very good this year, but they are not going to be very good this year. Tua is not it. They overpaid him, and it seems like the McDaniel thing is very much wearing off. The rap references, the guy in the just being quirky and funny at the microphone, Mike Jones, like that all was good when you're winning 11 games. When you're not winning 11 games and you have proven over the course of the last 3 years that you can't win in the month of December because it gets a little chilly outside, The Dolphins, I don't know that the Dolphins are going to be fully intact by the time the Commanders play them in Barcelona. It would not stun me if McDaniel is no longer the coach and they have just completely punted on this season. Tyreek Hill doesn't want to be there. Do not allow him to lie to you and say that he actually does want to be there.
He wants to
does
hang
not.
out with Aiden Ross more than he wants to play football.
He wants to hang out with Aiden Ross. He wants to hang out there with baby Gronk. And like whatever you feel about Tyreek Hill, the person, I don't feel very good about him. But maybe you feel differently about Tyreek Hill, the person. An NFL player hanging out with like a weird 14-year-old is weird.
Yeah,
there
confirmed.
is no way to spin it that an NFL player hanging out with a dude whose dad is forcing him to be popular and basically buying women for the kid, that is weird. And Tyreek Hill was hanging out with baby Gronk and just trying to hype up baby Gronk. Weird. That situation is going to be a disaster. So maybe if you're Washington and you love Jalen Ramsey more than you love Marshawn Lattimore, you put him in the trade, you get Jalen Ramsey. You're going to have to pay Jalen Ramsey. He wants a new contract. The issue that I have with Jalen Ramsey and why I would not go and get him, because let me make this abundantly clear. I don't really have a huge interest in Jalen Ramsey at this particular point in time. I have an interest in a pass rusher. I have an interest in somebody that can set an edge and stop the damn run when Saquon Barkley comes to town, or when you go and you play Saquon Barkley, or the Giants, because their no-named running back last year had nearly 120 yards in the first quarter, or whoever Dallas trots out there at running back. You got Bijan Robinson again on your schedule this year. Like, you play a lot of really good running backs, the Lions duo. I need someone that can go out there and set an edge. Now, Jalen Ramsey played well in run defense, so hooray for that, but he's also a cornerback. I don't want a cornerback to set an edge. I want a guy that can get after the passer and stifle up this defensive line. So I'm not in on Jalen Ramsey at all. But if you are in on Jalen Ramsey, Lattimore needs to be part of the deal. And then they can deal Miami with his contract. You can pay Jalen Ramsey. And then in 2 years, when he outwears his welcome, like he has done in Jacksonville, like he has done in Los Angeles, and like he has now done in Miami, well, then you can decide to move on from him. And then hope maybe, just maybe, you make some sort of like crazy, massive package deal where when both guys seemingly outweigh their welcome, you can trade Laramie Tunsil and Jalen Ramsey, because those are two guys that have done the exact same thing. They are not in positions with teams for extended periods of time. And there are a lot of reasons, like you can point to the Rams' financial situation as to why Jalen Ramsey had to leave, but you can manipulate the cap very easily in today's NFL. If they wanted to keep him, they would have kept him. If the Miami Dolphins really wanted to keep him, they would keep him. They don't really want to keep him. He does not want to be there. I understand that he wants to win. I don't want Jalen Ramsey. And I know I'm in the minority because I see it on Twitter that everybody wants Jalen Ramsey. And I think most of you are falling for the name more than you are falling for the player. He was really good at times in Jacksonville. He's not a bad player by any stretch of the imagination, but he is not nearly the player that is going to be worth the money and then potential assets that he would command. And oh, by the way, it's not like you have a lot of assets to give up. The Commanders have 5 draft picks next year for the second year in a row in 2026. 5, which is another reason why if you do make this trade, you have to put a player in there. And the player that makes the most sense would be Marshawn Lattimore, because it's not like you can take away from any other position unless you want to trade like a Luke McCaffrey. But I don't think Miami is going to be like, yeah, we'll take Luke McCaffrey for Jalen Ramsey straight up. That's not going to happen. So you need to trade a player in there. But again, I don't think the juice that Jalen Ramsey would bring is worth the necessary squeeze that Washington would have to make. It's the name over the actual production. It almost feels a little too Dan Snyder-esque. Oh, look at this big name player that wants out. We should go sell the farm to get him. We should go give up assets that we find to be valuable, deviate away from the current plan that we have in place, and go and get him. I'm not in on that at all. I'm totally good on that. I think the Laramie Tunsil thing, as much as I have question marks about him, it makes sense because you need a left tackle that can block and a guy that can protect Jaden Daniels. The Debo thing makes a ton of sense. Didn't really work in San Francisco. They just weren't going to pay him. But he brings something to the offense that you did not have. What does Jalen Ramsey bring to the defense that you did not have, other than being an aging defensive back that is likely over the peak of his prime? The same way that Marshawn Lattimore is. So if you already have one of those dudes, I'm not moving heaven and earth. I'm not moving nothing to go and get him, get another one of those dudes to then potentially push Trey Amos out, push Mikey Sainristil out. I don't see or want Mikey Sainristil or Trey Amos, at least at this point in time, to kick to safety. I'm sure someone's going to tweet me, which you can, at the Denton Day when we open up the phones on this topic at 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Someone might say, Denton, just kick one of them to safety. I don't have any interest in kicking Trey Amos or Mikey Sainristil to safety for Jalen Ramsey in 2025. In 2018, hell yes, brother. In 2025, I have zero interest in making that a reality here. Good player, send him to Atlanta. If he goes to Dallas, Dallas is rumored with all of these things, sick. Let him go to Dallas. Terry will burn him a couple of times. Maybe Debo will burn him a couple of times. I'll be perfectly fine with that. I don't need to move heaven and earth to get that guy here, though. I just don't. And I think a lot of us are jumping too much on the name because the team was good last year. Everybody wants to win this year. I get it. I don't need Jalen Ramsey. I want your thoughts at 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Do you want Washington to make a move for Jalen Ramsey after Jalen Ramsey says he is ready to start a new chapter? We will take your calls on that when we get back. A what do you got when we get back as well? That'll come with a little bit of life advice. It's something you don't want to miss. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton Day sitting in for Kevin on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app. Do you want Jalen Ramsey to be a Washington Commander in 2025? Ramsey put off a string of tweets last night signaling a new chapter on the horizon. When you put a string of tweets out saying it's time for something new, he is not just excited about OTAs. That's not how that works. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton Day sitting in 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. If you want to weigh in on Jalen Ramsey, I'm good. Don't need him. Been a hell of a player for his career. Can't take it away from him. Won a championship. Great championship experience, I'm sure. Don't need him here. I don't need an influx of defensive backs, specifically defensive backs that are older. I want guys that can rush the passer. The biggest flaw that this team has had, as far as I'm concerned, this offseason is not getting a guy that can rush the passer. It feels like they're relying a little too much on the journeyman, a little too much on the idea that somebody is going to take a massive step forward. I would have liked to see them bolster it more than they did with just a bunch of one-year deals and a guy in Javon Kinlaw that production-wise has not exactly been excellent in his NFL career. I know he's tied to Adam Peters. I'm going to trust Adam Peters, but I also would like a lot more help on the defensive line than what has been currently given. But we'll stick to Jalen Ramsey at the moment. Do you want the Commanders to make a move for Jalen Ramsey? 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. You can tweet me as well at the Denton Day. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can leave a comment. I'm reading the comments. If you're not watching us on YouTube, we're available every day, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern time on the Team 980's YouTube page. Let's go to my guy Ross in Tampa. Ross, what's going on?
Hey, what's going on, D?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good, man. Before I get to the Jalen Ramsey stuff, because I went off to Max about it, you had mentioned an old name that brought back some memories because the Lattimore names get mixed up. Marcus Lattimore, it convinced me that I wasn't good enough in the NFL when he and I met at a South Carolina camp back in 2008. He kind of let me know that mowing down boys in Indiana as a running back is a little bit different than doing it in the South. And I'm like, man, that kid could have been a Hall of Famer at this point, but, you know, some injuries will do it for a running back. But no, I was telling Max, I'm good. I'm tired of this. We're not in that regime anymore when a football player who's in the back end of his prime or just now exiting his prime is available, or there's hints that he's available, and everybody got the eyeball emojis all over Twitter, and they're all excited. Oh, my God, let's get him. No, we ain't doing that. Because you know what had happened last time, Denton? You would know what had happened if Snyder or Bruce Allen or whoever was still running the team. They would have given Gabe Taylor a 53-man roster spot right away. And then we're not talking about bringing in another DB because that spot would have been given. Now, I love Gabe Taylor. That's not a shot at him. I just know how the old team would have did things. But I don't want old guys coming in. I want Adam Peters to continue to do it in a slow-paced way. People don't understand. You can thank Ron Rivera and the old regime because Shaka Toney, James Smith-Williams, Casey Tuhill, none of those guys did anything. And so you kind of got to just start fresh, man.
Right.
I do believe they're going to end up picking up a pass rusher during training camp when they're ready to be a part of a team. But man, I don't want no Jalen Ramsey. But if you trade for Marcus Lattimore, I did it too. Damn. If you trade for Marshawn Lattimore, then I'm cool with that too. But no, I don't need all these veterans, man.
No, I'm with you, Ross. I appreciate it. See, if you love college football, the Marcus and the Marshawn Lattimore thing is such an easy tie to make. But I agree with you in that this is like the reason that you bring in Adam Peters is because he is to an extent a wizard, you know, pun intended, DC, ha, ha, ha. But it also is to let him cook. And what did he cook up the best in his previous stops? He was a great drafter. He was great at developing talent. Like if you look at some of the guys that have been drafted under the watchful eye in some capacity of Adam Peters, you're not going to give him credit for 100% of all the dudes in San Francisco, Denver, and New England, but the track record of guys that he drafted that played a long time in the NFL, or just even like 5th, 6th, 7th rounders that played more than 3 or 4 years in the NFL is actually astonishing. So that's what he is here for. I don't think he is a guy that just wants to retool with all big name players like your Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey played in Jacksonville. We're going to Jacksonville. John is in Jacksonville. John, what's going on?
Good morning, Denton. Yes. So let me preface by saying I've been a Washington fan for over 50 years, but I've lived here for almost 40. So when he was drafted, you know, they loved it. He was a tremendous player, but it's not his playing capability that concerns me. I'm sure you've heard some of the antics with him. He did the backed up the Brinks truck because he wanted an extension. Yeah. Then when he really wanted out, during a game when Doug Marrone was still the head coach before Doug Peterson took over, or Urban Meyer, excuse me, he faked an injury, which was very obvious. He had a confrontation with the coach, basically embarrassed the coach. Coach told him to sit down. He wouldn't even listen to him. He is a malcontent. And based on what Dan Quinn is doing in Washington, that's the last thing you want. He's got a culture. I think this is a guy that would upset that more than anything else.
Yeah. So, John, I appreciate the call. The Brinks truck thing, I remember very vividly because I'm a pro wrestling guy, and that's about as pro wrestling as it gets. Literally backing up a Brinks truck. And he had like one of his boys or one of his agents with a megaphone jump out and basically cut like a WWE style promo on why Jalen Ramsey needs to get paid. I would say that some of the issues that plagued Jalen Ramsey from a personality standpoint were just the fact that he was young. He was young, he was good, and as a cornerback, you have to have a level of personality where you are a little bit more brash. So that sort of stuff doesn't necessarily bother me. The confrontation with the coaches, there might be another question. If you're starting to confront like a Dan Quinn on the sideline, that might be something that goes sideways. We don't really need any more of the John Allen, Daron Payne squaring up and having fisticuffs on the sidelines, especially now that this team is in a bunch of primetime games. You're basically every single game is going to be highly watched. That takes the Commanders into consideration. So, like, you don't need a guy that is going to be what you described as a malcontent. I just don't think he's going to be good enough. I don't think he's in his prime right now. And as a cornerback, when you lose the prime, when you lose the speed, you're in a little bit of trouble. I think you can be a really good wide receiver upwards of 35 to 36 years old because there's so much nuance when it comes to route running and being able to create separation and win matchups. Cornerback is not quite like running back. I still think you can be good past the age of 30 years old, but it's very similar, probably the closest to running back, where it does feel like there's much more of a drop-off and a much quicker drop-off once you hit a certain age because you just start to lose some of the physical abilities that you had when you were younger. So I don't have any, again, I don't want Jalen Ramsey. But we're taking your phone calls, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Let's go out to Tyson's. My guy Alfred's in Tyson's. Alfred, what's going on?
Just wanted to jump in on this conversation. And I think it's asinine to say you wouldn't want a Jalen Ramsey. I mean, you're talking about a versatile player that can play outside corner, slot. He could play the big nickel role as Jeremy Chin. We've seen him do wonders with Raheem Morris. We've seen him also be productive in Miami. Last season was an anomaly with the fact that they had a new defensive coordinator, Anthony Weaver from the Ravens, but they didn't have a pass rush. And even if you took 2024 Jalen Ramsey and brought him on this team, he'd be their best defensive player. So to say you wouldn't want him, and especially you don't know what you're getting on the outside in a Trey Amos, you kind of know what Marshawn Lattimore has been in this league. You've seen Mikey. He had his struggles in the slot, kind of still had a productive rookie season.
But Mikey was great when he moved him outside. I mean, he excelled, even though he's short.
I mean, I don't want to say great. He was
the best DB on the outside.
He was solid enough, but at the end of the day, if you bring in a Jalen Ramsey in here that provides you that versatility of being able to play safety, corner, and all these different things, and being able to match up one-on-one in the tight end, he's an intelligent football player, high football IQ. I think all the other things, you've never heard any teammates speak negatively about him. So that's just like whatever, right?
Yeah, I mean, as far as like, real quick, I'll let you finish here. Yeah. I'm in agreement with you there. Like, no teammate has ever said anything bad about him. The thing with the coach was the thing with the coach. I like the Brinks truck thing, honestly. I thought it was funny. I got what he was trying to do there. Off the field, he's never had any issues.
No, definitely, and I feel like even the guys that have coached him, such as a Raheem Morris, such as a Vero, who's the DC for the Panthers, everyone speaks so highly of him from a football acumen standpoint. If you put him into a situation like this with Dan Quinn and Joe Wood Jr., who have handled big personalities over the year, I mean, Dan Quinn had Richard Sherman. He's one of the most brash football players in the last decade, personality-wise. I just think that he would immediately make this team better and someone that can go about spreading the game and different nuances of the position to Mike Sanders and Trey Amos to help them along the years. Because, I personally wouldn't feel comfortable starting the season with banking on Trey Amos as the opposite corner because he can't play the slot. So he has to play on the outside.
Yeah, he has to play outside.
Marshawn.
Yeah, you're right. Alfred, that's a great call. I appreciate it. You are correct in that Trey Amos is basically going to be outside or bust. He's not a slot guy, but he has the size and the length to play outside. I think the one of the main points is that you and I just stand at a different spot with Mikey. I thought Mikey was really good last year, especially at the end of the year. So I'm really excited to see what he's going to be like in year number 2. It's just that I don't know what you would have to give up for Jalen Ramsey that would then justify bringing in Jalen Ramsey at this point in time. If it is a release, if the Dolphins are silly enough to release him, the problem is they're just not going to do that. There's going to be too much of a market that they're going to be able to get something in return. Maybe not a lot in return in relation to who Jalen Ramsey is, but they'll be able to get something in return for him trade-wise. So you would have to jump into the conversation with a trade of yourself. And then it then becomes, how much assets do you have? How much do you want to give up? Again, if you do trade for Jalen Ramsey, Marshawn Lattimore should be involved in that trade. I don't think you can have 2 of those guys outside, but if you bring in Jalen Ramsey and then get Lattimore out of there, you still have a functional defensive backfield to work with, and you're not sidelining either Mikey Sanders still or Trey Amos. Because regardless on how you think that Mikey was at the end of last season, if you disagree with me, I think he was really good. Maybe you think he was just good. Maybe you think he was average. Whatever your opinion is on him, I don't think anyone is going to say he should be benched. I want to see him on the field. I want to see him to continue to mature and get better at the defensive back position. Let's go to Lap in D.C. Lap, do you want Jalen Ramsey here?
Hey, what's up, Dent? I'm open to it, man. But that's a great point that you were saying about trading Lattimore for him, man. I didn't think of that. But, yeah, I would like to see both of them. But Sanders still, man, he was a beast.
He's a dog.
I'm going to tell you, though, Dent, I need our defense to really help the offense out because it looked like we might be leaning on the offense yet again. But this defense got to get stops, man, some kind of way. You can force some turnovers, holding teams, 3 and out, holding teams to field goals, but definitely forcing turnovers. And that's what I'm kind of disappointed because I know Dan Quinn's defenses did a lot of forcing turnovers. We haven't done that yet. So I'm waiting for that to pop if we don't have that premier, pass rush. Is Jadeveon Clowney still available? Because if he is, I think we need to go get him. But I am open for the Jalen Ramsey, though.
They need Lap. I appreciate it as always. They need a pass rusher. I don't know if Clowney's like the right guy, but they need a pass rusher. You're right on turnovers, by the way. It's been like an eternity since this team has had a good turnover forcing machine or turnover forcing year when it comes to defense. If you want to jump in on the conversation, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. The question, do you want Jalen Ramsey? Should the NFL go and get, or should the Commanders go and get Jalen Ramsey? Junkyard Dog is on the line. JYD, what's up?
How you doing?
I
got
good,
a car or a truck to go get him. I can. Or whatever. Simply because I'm not, with Adam Peters, everybody's singing his praises. But
yeah,
it seems to me that he is, sometimes when you know how back in the day mom and dad would tell you, be patient and something else will come down the line. I thought that, Lattimore doesn't fit here. First of all, the only thing I remember about Lattimore this year was that he played one game. He played against the Eagles, and he thought that he could go out there and huff and puff A.J. Brown and those guys or whatever. And you know what? They just laughed at him or whatever. If they can unload Lattimore for Ramsey, I would do it in a heartbeat. Because along the way, you got Mike on the other side, and then you got the kid coming in, the Amos or whatever. Then they will have somebody that they actually can learn from.
JYD, I appreciate it. I am envious that you only remember one game from Marshawn Lattimore because I very much remember the first half of that Buccaneers game, and I would like to not remember the first half of that Buccaneers game because he was atrocious. Mike Evans had that dude looking like barbecue chicken, and it was not a good time. A couple comments in the YouTube chat. We are on YouTube at the Team 980. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube, go ahead and do so. The Kevin Sheehan Show is live 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. via video every day on YouTube. Thomas M says Jalen Ramsey is washed. He is too old for all that money. He does have a lot of money left in the contract, and I don't know. So I would have said probably 2 months ago that if you trade for a guy like Jalen Ramsey, you would then have to pay him. We said that about Laramie Tunsil, and they did not do that about Laramie Tunsil. They adjusted some of the money so he has more guarantees, but they did not immediately sign him to a new deal. So I don't know that you would have to bring Jalen Ramsey in and immediately sign him to a new deal, but he does have a lot of money wrapped up in that contract. Devin says that Ramsey is older and should be moving to safety soon. He's a great tackler in the open field. Great IQ. Would be amazing to add him to help the young guys for 2 to 3 years. If he moves to safety, that conversation, I think, is drastically different, Devin. So you brought up a great point that no one else has brought up, and I wasn't really thinking of, to be honest, because I have just solely thought of Jalen Ramsey as a cornerback. But if Jalen Ramsey is open to and wants to move to safety, that conversation is way different because I think he fits this defense significantly better at the safety position. So that's a very good point made by Devin in our YouTube chat. Again, watch us on YouTube, subscribe to us on YouTube at the Team 980. The Kevin Sheehan Show is live 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern. Craig Hoffman 4 to 7, and you'll see a little bit of Denton's office on there as well throughout the course of the week during the offseason. Coming up, Jordan Dejani is going to join us from CBS Sports in about 20 minutes, but coming up when we get back, life advice from me in the form of a what do you got? It involves a DMV standout and water. You don't want to miss it. That's coming up when we get back. The DC Defenders are going out with a salute. Join them Friday, May 30th. That's tomorrow at Audi Field for Hats Off to Heroes, a special night honoring our military, first responders, and armed service. Tickets at ufldefenders.com/tickets. That's ufldefenders.com/tickets.
All right, last night, the Nats, they get back in the win column, beating the Seattle Mariners 9-0. James Wood hit his 15th home run of the season, and Robert Hassel hit his first career home run of the big leagues. The Oklahoma City Thunder, they crushed the hopes and dreams of the Minnesota Timberwolves 124-94. MVP Shai Gilgeous-Alexander led OKC with 34.7 rebounds and 8 assists. The Florida Panthers, they pulled it out in the third period. The Caps killer Carter Verhaeghe scored the go-ahead goal, and they close out the Canes 5-3. Tonight, you get the Oilers. They're taking on the Dallas Stars at 8 on ESPN, and the Pacers look to finish off the New York Knicks at the Garden tonight at 8 on TNT. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that's what's trending.
All right, Kevin Sheehan Show, Denton Day sitting in, and in this What Do You Got features a whole lot of life advice. If you are a wide receiver in the NFL, a player in the NFL for that matter, I don't care what position you play, and someone comes up to you and says, hey, I got a boat. I got a lot of women that want your attention. You want to come on this boat? Your answer should be no. Stephon Diggs learned that the hard way. He was partying with Cardi B, hanging out. Cardi B was getting twerked on by a lot of people, Max, and none of them that I saw on video were Stephon Diggs.
I mean, we're supporting. We're being supportive.
I'm not critiquing their relationship. There's a whole bunch of different definitions for relationships nowadays that my generation has created that I don't know about, or maybe not created, but they have popularized. Poly,
very
Dolly,
happy you don't know about it.
Nolly, whatever the hell it is. I don't know what they was doing, but Cardi B was on the boat. Stephon Diggs was on the boat. Cardi B was getting twerked on. And literally, I don't know who the camera person was. That camera person was not the friend of Stephon Diggs, though. I will tell you that. Camera person is focused on Cardi B getting a lap dance from somebody, if you could call it that. And then pans over to the right, and they see Stephon Diggs surrounded by a multitude of women. All of them were rubbing on his chest. I think one touched his face. It's kind of weird. Stephon Diggs was talking to him. I'm not a lip reader. I'm not going to try to do the lip reading thing. I did not need to read lips, however. When he pulled out a little baggie with some pink substances in there, there was a little bit of green in there too. And I'm not talking money when I say green. It was a baggie that was multiple colored. And he handed it to one of the women. He said, don't take all of it. I don't know what was in that bag, Max.
That's sage advice right there.
It is sage advice.
That's somebody looking out for you.
It might have saved that person's life, depending on what was in the bag. I don't know what was in the bag. I cannot speculate as to what was in the bag. It wasn't his playbook, though.
No. You're not finding plays in there.
It was not that kind of plays. It wasn't cleats. It definitely wasn't cleats. No shoulder pads in there, helmets, jerseys, none of that stuff.
Could have been some. What, you think they make pink creatine now?
Nope.
Well,
I don't think so.
Well, I tried, Stephon.
You tried. Now, this might surprise some of you based off of my appearance and apparent personality. I have never done cocaine.
Congrats.
Yep, not a drugs guy, so I don't know what it looks like in a bag. That looked like it, though.
I mean,
just pink. I don't know if that was a new thing. Like, I don't know what's pink in the drug game. I'm out of the loop in the fact that I was never in the loop. I don't know what's pink, but I know what you carry in a little baggie.
Yeah.
It's not good. And that's a wide receiver that was just signed to the New England Patriots after the Houston thing didn't work.
And you see the video of the Patriots receivers doing the ball catching drill through traffic?
I did not.
They were not catching them. We'll just leave it at that.
So the Patriots receivers already in OTAs dropping the ball. Mike Vrabel was asked about this, and he said, we want to make good decisions on and off the field. And that screams, that's loud. That off the field is very, very loud.
Very.
And Stephon Diggs was not at OTAs. It's a bad look, man. It's a bad look. Now, Diggs has been in he's been on front page news a lot this year in the entertainment section because he's hanging out with Cardi B. He's hanging out with Cardi B. Cardi B's not with Offset anymore. They're linked together. But then to be doing this, like when you're courtside at the Knicks games, that's sick. That's cool. That's all good. When you're on the boat with some substances, some paraphernalia.
Which are, by the way, very illegal to have on a boat. Like they're even more strict about those types of things.
Very dangerous.
Especially if you're on the water.
Very, very dangerous. So not a good look by Stephon Diggs. When has being a wide receiver on a boat ever worked out? Has anyone checked on the Giants after the boat picture? Because it hasn't been good.
No.
Again, like if you are an NFL player and someone says, I got some bad looking women and a boat, you want to come hang out? You should probably say no.
But it's
especially if they got a camera. I mean, God almighty.
Yeah.
Like it didn't look, maybe it was a phone camera, but even still, like you got to know, like you can't be putting that sort of stuff on the internet.
It's also very noticeable when somebody has a phone up like this in your face, like not even 5 feet away from you, is pointing it at you.
Like you should know that.
Yeah,
you should know that. You know what's crazy is this was years ago, so this is a little bit of a deep cut. But if you're chronically online, you saw it. It was a video from the Vikings locker room, just kind of tongue in cheek. I don't know who was working the camera. It's not important. They're going around to everyone in the Vikings locker room and saying, who would you least like to date your
I
sister?
remember this.
And nearly everyone said Stephon Diggs. And at the time, you're just like, all right, he's a wide receiver. Maybe he gets around a lot, like whatever. But this was in like 2000. I think this was pre-Minneapolis Miracle. So
16, maybe?
This is like 2016, maybe 2017. I don't remember. I guess that Miracle was 18. So it might have been 2017. And you're thinking, all right, whatever. Like, it just is what it is, kind of a deal. Like, I don't know. I get it now.
Oh, it makes.
I mean, I get it. I
sense.
get it now. You just don't. You don't need that. You don't need any of that. Just be smart when you're on boats. I'm going to get on a boat this summer at some point, Max. I'm not going to be doing.
You're going to paddleboard
whatever.
out there.
Well, if I'm just paddleboard, I'll paddleboard by myself. I don't need no boat.
True.
Just be on the Potomac, rowing away. But
Pray to God you don't fall in.
Don't keep the small baggies on you. I have another. What do you got here? That you just informed me of, and I think it's important to bring up here. Charlie Baker is the president of the NCAA. We're gonna have Sheehan Jeyarajah on in a little over an hour. He's gonna talk college football, but there are changes happening across all of college sports. And Charlie Baker, who is the president of the NCAA, has basically put all the cards on the table and said, we are going to expand March Madness. Yuck.
Stop. Just
awful. Stinks. You know what? It doesn't even stink. It sucks. This is a terrible idea. This is some nimbusel saying we're going to fix what isn't broken. The NCAA is in American sports the most perfect model of what a tournament should look like. The regular season is already devalued in college basketball. Unless you are a massive fan of one particular school, you are not watching college basketball year round. It's partly my job to watch that damn sport, Max, and I'm not watching college basketball year round. It's just not happening. It is now even less.
Well,
it's even less of a draw when everyone's going to get in, because it's not like they're just going to add 2 or 3. Like, they're probably going to get the number to 80 so they can get just about everybody in the SEC and Big Ten into the dance. I don't want to watch this. I thought last year's tournament was good. It was perfect almost. You got a little bit of upsets, but the upsets didn't take away from the good teams playing. I want the good teams. Upsets are fun. That first weekend, after that, no upsets. I want good teams and good teams only. We got that last year. This is all about money. And the reason this ties into college football is because all of the changes that college football is making is all about the money. This is what happens when you take something that is crafted unbelievably well, and then somebody comes in with a just mega uber capitalistic stick and says, we will crush all of the fun to make as much money as possible. As much money as possible. We are going to squeeze every little penny out of this thing that we have, and we are going to then in turn end up ruining this. So, I mean, what is going to happen now with 80 teams, with 76 teams, whatever that number is actually going to be? You basically expand the tournament for a week. Well, most people, the 3 weekends that it is perfect, because it gives you something to look forward at the end of each week. You get the playing games on like your Tuesdays and your Wednesdays, and then Thursday through Sunday, basketball, break. Thursday through Sunday, basketball, break. And then you get your Saturday Final Four, your Monday National Championship, and then you ride off into the sunset and you don't care about college basketball again for the next 11 months. Expanding it, I don't think, is going to give them the results that they are looking for, but it's going to make them enough money to justify doing it. And that's the part that stinks, because I can't push back against the money. It's a money-making industry. They are going to make money. Television companies are going to pay for these extra games. Advertisers are going to pay for these extra games. It's stupid. It's going to dilute something that has been very, very good and very, very sick for a long time. Sick as in the positive way, not sick as in the need of help, but they're treating it like it's sick in the need of help because a couple of SEC coaches over the course of the years, and ironically, you know who one of the voices was that complained the most, Max? I'm going to test your college basketball knowledge. No shot?
I'm trying to think.
He was in the SEC, and he's not in the SEC anymore. 2 years ago, it was 2 or 3 years ago, Texas A&M was on the outside looking in. Buzz Williams not thrilled about it. Buzz Williams now the coach of Maryland.
It's true.
It's not him in specific that has led us to the point where the NCAA tournament is now completely screwed. But he didn't help matters. He complained. Texas A&M's big sillies complained. And now Charlie Baker is going to do this to make some money. The NCAA needs the money because they got to pay out billions of dollars to athletes that they did not allow to get paid prior. Coming up, Jordan Dejani, CBS Sports. We'll get back to the NFL, go around the NFL with him, including just how likely a Jalen Ramsey to Washington scenario actually is. Mark Zuckerman in 35 minutes. Talk about the Nats. Big win for them yesterday. Didn't go anywhere. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton. Sitting in for Kevin on the Team 980. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin here on the team at 980. Mark Zuckerman from Seattle in about 30 minutes. But we'll go to the phones right now. Welcome in from CBS Sports, Jordan Dejani. You can find him on Twitter at Jordan Dejani. My friend, it's been a while. How are you?
Denton, what's going on, man? Hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for having me on the show. And I'm excited to break down Florida yacht parties and pink substances with you today.
We are going to break down some pink and maybe green substances because it looked like there was a multitude of stuff in that bag. Your reaction to how Mike Vrabel commented on the Stephon Diggs situation?
Classic Vrabel. I miss having him in Nashville. He's one of my favorite head coaches in the NFL. He talks about how his players need to make great decisions on and off the field. And he automatically just starts talking about what's going on in practice that day with the players who are in attendance for OTAs. But the bottom line is it's not a good look for Stephon Diggs, who signed something like a $69 million contract with New England, who clearly overpaid for an older wide receiver coming off of a torn ACL because they believe he can be an important part of the development of Drake May, who I'm sure most people would agree has a lot of potential, what he showed in his first season in the NFL. So not a good look for the Patriots, and it's not a good look that a new head coach has to deal with off-field drama before we even get to the preseason.
What did you think of, maybe you didn't see this, but so I guess I'll ask you this. Did you see that Stephon Diggs then spent all day posting his workout clips on his Instagram story?
That's a smart play. That's exactly what I would have done.
Guys, look, I'm still working out. I might have been on a boat this weekend, but I'm still working out. How necessary do you think he is to the development of Drake May?
Yeah, see, that's a good question because not only is Stephon Diggs a really good wide receiver, and I understand, like I said, he's a little older coming off of that torn ACL, but the Patriots wide receiver room last year, in my opinion, was the worst in the NFL. And I understand they added a couple of pieces such as Kyle Williams from Washington State, who a lot of people are excited about, was a draft crush of many. But Stephon Diggs is the veteran in that room, the established guy, the person who's led the league in receiving touchdowns or made multiple Pro Bowls. So when we frame it like that, I do think that Stephon Diggs is a very important part of the development for Drake May, but also what the Patriots want to do offensively. Even if he's not going to make the Pro Bowl in 2025, having a consistent pass catcher like Stephon Diggs, I think, was something that the Patriots absolutely had to do this offseason.
When Mike Vrabel was in Tennessee, did they have their own spin on the Patriot way?
Yeah, it's a good question because Vrabel's talked about it a lot. Like, Vrabel doesn't want to be known for being a part of Bill Belichick's coaching tree. And it's like, to his point, he never was a coach under Bill Belichick. But
Right.
He also was a player under Bill Belichick for a long time. And I think a lot of people would agree that he acts like Bill Belichick. He doesn't like dealing with the media. He gives a lot of coach speak answers. And he's also a very smart head coach as well, who, if you've watched Titans games in the past, he's used some kind of some things from the rule book that most people usually don't utilize or are even unaware of. So I think that Mike Vrabel reminded a lot of people of Bill Belichick. But at the same time, I don't think I would compare the way that the Titans operated to the Patriots way. But maybe that's something that kind of changes now that he's actually back in New England. A Patriots legend is now running New England.
Final question on the Patriots and this whole situation for now. What is your level of optimism that Drake May takes a big step forward now that he has the entire offseason as being the starter in New England?
Yeah, I might not be the right person to ask because I'm actually kind of a Drake May fan. Like, when he was entering his final season at UNC, I actually thought he was someone who could take over the QB1 spot from Caleb Williams potentially. That's how much I like this kid. I think he's a dual threat passer. I think he possesses the physical tools necessary to be a legitimate starting quarterback at this level. And watching Patriots games, which I'm sure not a lot of casual NFL fans did in 2024, I think he showed a lot of potential. And as I mentioned, he was dealing with a horrific offensive line, a coaching staff that was one and done, and the worst wide receivers room in the NFL as well. So the fact that he was able to show us a certain level of promise should have Patriots fans optimistic, especially now that they have Mike Vrabel in the building, who not only is just a Patriots legend, but someone who is known for being able to implement the stability that these lowly franchises are so desperately after.
Talking with Jordan Dejani here on the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton Day sitting in for Kevin on the Team 980. You can find him on Twitter at Jordan Dejani. Big fuss here over the past 12, 18 hours, Jordan. Jalen Ramsey tweets that he's likely leaving Miami. Everyone thinks that Washington is a good landing spot for him. I'm a little slow. I'm hitting the brakes a little bit on that one. But where do you stand on the best fits for Jalen Ramsey? Is Washington one of them?
That's kind of interesting. People are talking about Washington with Jalen Ramsey, and maybe it would make a lot more logical sense to me if the Commanders did not just recently go after a veteran cornerback who was a former star in Marshawn Lattimore at last year's trade deadline. So that's why Washington wouldn't jump off the page to me as an immediate fit for Jalen Ramsey, even though cornerback is, I guess, somewhat of a need. When it comes to the Commanders right now, I'd be hammering home pass rusher. I don't think they did enough at defensive end. But when it comes to Jalen Ramsey and other potential fits, to be honest with you, I'm already penciling him in to one team. And it's a team he's already played for, a team that appears to be all in for a Super Bowl in the NFC. That's the Los Angeles Rams. I think that the Rams, for multiple reasons, make a lot of sense for Jalen Ramsey. But they haven't been working hard to get a deal done, I guess I would say. Sean McVay's been asked about Jalen Ramsey multiple times this offseason. And by the way, you brought up that Jalen Ramsey took to social media yesterday to talk about how he's looking forward to the next chapter. I feel like he did that because he's not getting to that next chapter fast enough. We knew that Jalen Ramsey was going to be on the move for what seems like months, at least weeks at this point, and nothing has come to fruition. And there are multiple reasons why, not to go off on a tangent, but he's now the number 3 highest paid cornerback in the NFL. He just got paid like last year. He's averaging $24.1 million per year. So the money issues for whatever team wants to take him on is certainly a tough mountain to climb. But on top of that, Miami also wants adequate draft compensation in return for the services of their number 1 cornerback as well. So those are reasons why Jalen Ramsey hasn't been on the move just yet. I don't think he would come too expensive in terms of draft compensation. And again, I think the Dolphins would absolutely have to take on a good chunk of money to move him. But I would keep an eye on the Los Angeles Rams, maybe the Cincinnati Bengals, the Green Bay Packers with whatever's going on with Jair Alexander. Those are a couple of teams to keep in mind.
You know, that's been my stance, is something you mentioned in there, is that the amount of draft compensation, like they're not just going to give Jalen Ramsey up for like a 5th round pick. They're going to want a lot in return. Washington doesn't have a lot to give in return for that. And then the money is substantial. I mean, $24 million per year for a guy that's over the age of 30 at that position, where you tend to see a guy slow down a little bit, especially when physically they're not as fast as they once were. It just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense here. And then you and I are on the same page. They need more pass rushers. They didn't really address that this offseason the way that I thought they did. That's actually worried me a little bit with the way the Commanders have had this offseason.
Yeah, as it should. I mean, last time I was on the radio with you, we talked about pass rush kind of being one of the top needs for this franchise, and it seems like they haven't really addressed it. But, hey, I mean, Trey Hendrickson is still kind of out there. I'm sure that he obviously wants to get paid, which is something that could hurt Washington and their chances of acquiring him. But, I mean, you lose your leading sack king, Dante Fowler Jr., in free agency. And, by the way, he had more sacks than the rest of Washington's defensive ends combined in 2024. Another name that I would put out there, and it's actually someone I mentioned for CBSSports.com, what about Jadeveon Clowney? I understand he's not some perennial Pro Bowl player at this stage in his career, but with the way Washington operates, could he be someone as a veteran option who would automatically improve this defensive line, which, by the way, I think ranks bottom 3 in containing the run in 2024. So Jadeveon Clowney is a name to keep an eye on as well.
If you had to pick between a guy like a Von Miller at 36, a Matthew Judon at 32, or a Clowney who's also at 32, but like 4 or 5 months younger than Matthew Judon, is Clowney the best bet of those 3?
You know what's funny? I think I actually would pick Clowney. Like, Von Miller is obviously a Hall of Famer, but he's a little long in the tooth. Matt Judon is someone the Atlanta Falcons took a chance on last year in trading with the New England Patriots. He didn't really make an immediate impact. In fact, I think Atlanta arguably had one of the worst pass rushing units in the league in 2024. So Matt Judon is not that attractive of a name to me anymore. I think that it would be Jadeveon Clowney. And I understand if Washington would go that direction as opposed to trading for Trey Hendrickson, who wants something like $30 million a year. I would probably pick Jadeveon Clowney out of those three names.
Jordan Dejani, our guest here on the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton Day, sitting in for Kevin. When is Aaron Rodgers going to sign? Is Aaron Rodgers going to sign?
Dude, I'm so sick about – oh, my gosh. I'm sick of talking about Aaron Rodgers. You know, I will say this. Mike Tomlin had a famous quote during the Le'Veon Bell fiasco, and I can't help but think about it right now. We need volunteers, not hostages. And it's kind of annoying for the Steelers and their fan base to be held hostage by a 41-year-old player who's obviously now older, and he's polarizing at that. What exactly would Aaron Rodgers do to enhance the Steelers' ceiling in 2025? I would still view the Steelers as this team that might go 9-8, maybe make the playoffs, get blown out in that first round in a game that many people won't watch. That's still how I view the Pittsburgh Steelers. And here's something I will say, too. There's probably some kind of understanding between Rodgers and the Steelers behind the scenes, right? But there's no guarantee that's true. And from the outside looking in, the whole situation seems kind of silly at this point. What I continue to ask myself, and I'll ask publicly, is there a breaking point? Like, when would the Steelers be forced to change course and start paying more attention to Will Howard, or maybe even entertain trading for Kirk Cousins from the Atlanta Falcons? We're about to turn the calendar to June. There has to be some kind of breaking point for when they start just shifting their attention from Aaron Rodgers, because I'm sure you would agree, Denton, it seems pretty wild that we're still talking about this conversation.
I thought this was going to be over at the end of the draft. I thought he was going to sign like the next 2 or 3 days after that. Now we're at OTAs, and he's doing podcasts. Sarah, I don't know if it's a podcast, a festival with like Big Mike Stud. I don't even know how. First of all, I don't even know if I want to know how that friendship came to be. But I did some research on Big Mike Stud. Wasn't familiar. Not exactly like my and your age range, right? A lot of stuff made sense after. I was like, all right, yep, frat rap. That seems like Aaron Rodgers. That's right up his alley. It's just so odd to me. How much of this do you think is the ego of Mike Tomlin for wanting to, maybe in the back of his head, keep this streak alive of him consistently having winning records? Because it feels like at the very least, Aaron Rodgers would do, as you just mentioned, at least 9-8 if A-Rod is the quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, the streak is impressive, of course, but I feel like I would point more towards the Steelers just having as competitive of a football team as possible. That's what Mike Tomlin wants. You know, it's not about his historical streak. It's trying to chase Super Bowls. And, you know, there are people out there who still believe that Aaron Rodgers can play at a high level. And he had some pretty impressive performances during last season with the New York Jets, even though his tenure in the Big Apple was disastrous overall. So with a favorable position, favorable landing spot, I guess I will describe Pittsburgh as being. You know, they have gotten the best out of some quarterbacks such as Mason Rudolph before. They've added DK Metcalf. They've revamped the running back room. The offensive line should be more consistent. You know, you could talk yourself into Aaron Rodgers being, if he can just be a consistent quarterback and hit the shots that he needs to make, that Pittsburgh can be competitive. I think that's what Mike Tomlin is after. He wants to field the best football team possible. And at this stage in the offseason, you probably want Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback compared to Will Howard or Mason Rudolph.
Would you take Kirk over Aaron Rodgers if given the opportunity?
Well, it's funny because I've already hit my breaking point, as you can tell, with the whole Aaron Rodgers thing. So, yeah, I'd be turning my attention to Kirk Cousins. And, you know, there's similar to Jalen Ramsey, there's some money issues to work out there. And Atlanta reportedly has not been exactly flexible in those conversations behind the scenes in terms of how much money they're willing to take on. Of course, you got to give up some kind of late draft pick as well. But yeah, I'd probably be turning my attention to Kirk Cousins at this point.
Why is Atlanta so stingy with this? Because it feels like at least getting some of that money off the books and not having to pay $40-some-odd million for a guy that you don't want on the field would be the better of the options. It feels like they're kind of doing a little too much right now.
So first of all, I kind of love that they're doing this because they're, behind the scenes. They're not saying this, but the way I view it is, okay, Kirk, you tricked us into signing you to the most lucrative free agency contract last year, 4 years, $180 million, whatever it was. And it turns out that this Michael Penix Jr. kid from Washington is a better asset. So you're going to take your money, you're going to sit on the bench, and you're going to enjoy it. Now, naturally, that's not the way things are going. And ESPN actually had an interesting report last month saying that while the Falcons have been posturing as if Kirk Cousins being the number 2 and remaining on roster on that big contract is a legitimate possibility, that the Falcons secretly have recognized that their future is not tied to Aaron Rodgers and that it's probably better to move on from him. But again, the question is, when is the best time for that to happen? We all envisioned it would be after the draft because the Falcons would have a better understanding of the draft landscape. Maybe there's a team out there that could be more desperate for the services of Kirk Cousins. In terms of Kirk Cousins' viewpoint, he wouldn't be, as I like to describe, Kirk Cousins, where, he signs with a team and then that team drafts a quarterback. So it was attractive for him to wait until after the draft as well. But many people were looking at the Cleveland Browns as a potential landing spot for him, but they ended up drafting 100 quarterbacks, including Shedeur Sanders, and now they don't really have a need for Kirk Cousins. So, if you ask me where my money's at, I do think that we end up having a resolution to this whole fiasco soon enough. And again, I'll point to the Pittsburgh Steelers as kind of being the sleeper in this equation.
Every day, Jordan, I wake up and I pray. I was like, God, give me the challenge of my boss wanting to pay me $40 million to not work. Let me get that battle, please. I would gladly take that one. Like, I understand Kirk only has a couple good years left, wants to maximize it as much as he can before he eventually rides off into the sunset. I would have no problem if my boss said, we'll give you $40 million to not come to work or to come to work and not be a big deal. I could do that without ease.
That's the dream. That's the dream. Exactly right.
A couple more for you here. The best offseason has been had by which team so far in the NFL?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know if it would be the best in terms of the sheer amount of moves they've made, but I'm kind of really excited about the Los Angeles Rams, and they only have a chance to build on what I think has been a successful offseason with the acquisition of Jalen Ramsey as well. I feel like Davante Adams has a lot of tread left on the tires, and I feel like he is someone who is going to be the clear-cut number 1 for Matthew Stafford. You obviously have a Pro Bowl pass catcher already there established by the name of Puka Nacua. But guys, keep in mind, remember what happened last year with the Rams' young defensive front. They came one play away from basically hosting the NFC Championship game. In my opinion, the Rams are just right there. So with a guy like Poona Ford, Braden Fisk, Kobe Turner, Byron Young, Jared Verse, I'm really excited about what the Rams can be defensively in year 2 of this new era, if you will. But also, as I mentioned, offensively, I expect an uptick in production with the addition of Davante Adams. And maybe that tight end, Terrence Ferguson, as well, the rookie who the Rams front office reportedly was really high on.
I won't hold you to it because it's only May, but I think the AFC is fascinating because there are 4 teams that are at the top, and this is the first year, at least in a little bit, where the Chiefs feel a little more human just based off of how their offseason has gone and how their season ended last year. Who wins the AFC?
Yeah, if you were asking me for my power rankings right now, I think I'd probably actually lean towards the Baltimore Ravens for a couple of different reasons. I think that with the addition of DeAndre Hopkins, I don't think DeAndre Hopkins is going to make the Pro Bowl by any means, but I think having that reliable pass catcher for Lamar Jackson is going to be very important. But defensively, they made one of my favorite picks in the entire draft with Mike Green, the FBS's leading sack leader, I guess you should say, from last season. If Mike Green can be an absolute terror off the edge and be a legitimate defensive rookie of the year candidate with a healthy secondary as well in Baltimore, I think that the Ravens are going to be my pick to win the AFC.
I saw a picture of DeAndre Hopkins in that Ravens purple. It's impossible for a receiver to look like they're in their prime in the Ravens purple. Like he looks older than he is. Jordan, we appreciate the time as always, my friend. Hope you're doing well. Enjoy the summer coming up here, and hopefully the storm season in Nashville is chill this year. I know it's been kind of weird recently.
Yeah, we've been getting crushed, man. But thanks so much for having me on the show. It's always good to talk shop with you, Denton.
That is Jordan Dejani, CBS Sports, good enough to jump on with us here on the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton Day sitting in for Kevin on a Thursday. Mark Zuckerman is going to join us in about 15 minutes. Coming up next, we will shift very briefly into some NBA postseason. It was a disaster last night for the NBA, something that needs to be fixed as soon as possible, if not sooner. Don't go anywhere. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton Day. Kevin Sheehan Show. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin. If you like or love the NBA playoffs, last night sucked. I wanted a good game. It was over by the first quarter. Flipped that thing on. I was like, all right, here we go. Anthony Edwards, his response. Everyone, including me, was like, not the face of the league anymore. Not my face of the league. What is this guy going to look like? It wasn't good. 9 points in the first quarter. 9
whole points.
What is this? 5th grade basketball? 9 points?
I remember going to a JV girls basketball game in high school, and I think the final score was like 12-6.
That was basically what this first quarter was for one team. The Thunder didn't have any issues.
Seemed just fine.
They seemed just fine, but Minnesota couldn't do anything. And for a league that is seemingly in a free fall when it comes to ratings and interest and how to drive interest, how to get eyes on their product, there's been so much conversation about market size. Who cares about market size in 2025 of certain NBA teams? You could take a team from Bedford, Virginia, and if they're good enough with good enough players, people will ultimately watch the basketball. There are people in Maryland that are like, where is Bedford, Virginia? There are people in D.C. that are like, where is Bedford, Virginia?
There are people from Virginia going, where is
Bedford, Virginia? Bedford, Virginia is where I worked my first job. That's where that is. But you understand the point that I'm making. If you put a superstar on a team, people will watch it. It's selling stars, not selling teams, not selling jerseys, not selling cities. It made sense back in the way yesteryears, but even when I was in like middle and high school, because I couldn't watch teams across the country as frequently. Like when Gilbert Arenas was on this crazy hibachi run, because I grew up on that big three of Gil, Twan, and Caron Butler. When Gil was on this crazy run, he scored 60 against the Lakers. He scored like 54 against Phoenix. I think he had 40-something against Seattle in like a 3-game stretch all the way back in what? That was 2006, I think. I was in middle school in the gold jerseys. That was extra fun for me because I got to see the teams on the West Coast that you could not regularly see in the NBA if they were not placed on national television. And at the time, national television was not as frequent as it is now. It feels like every single night in the regular season, you get a nationally televised game, whether that be on NBA TV, ESPN, ABC, ESPN Plus, ESPN Deporte. Like, you understand. CT ESPN. I mean, Antonio Brown be standing in front of his league pass with his damn phone up, not recording the right way, but it'll still get you a game on live screen, right? So it was a lot more difficult back then to watch teams, but market size doesn't matter as long as the games are good. The problem is right now that Oklahoma City is so good that their games have kind of sucked because their best players aren't playing. And when you start it late on the East Coast, I mean, this one was 8:30. It was not terribly late, but once you start at 9, 10, 10:30, you do lose a little bit of your audience because people are going to bed. Now, I've always wondered this, Max, and we are not the right control group for this because we are like way deep into the sports. We're sickos. We also work weird hours, wonky hours. I am so curious how many 9-to-5ers stay up past 10:30, especially in this town when you got to wake up. Like if you're a 9-to-5er and you work in the city, but you don't live in the city, you're probably getting up at the latest at 6:30, got to get ready, then got to get on the road and sit through a gargantuan amount of traffic because there's always traffic here, especially now that people have to go back into the office. No one's staying up for these games on the East Coast.
Not a soul.
Because think about the East Coast and the markets that love basketball. It's New York, it's DC, and then maybe it's a little bit of Atlanta, Philly, what have you. But these are major cities that all have awful traffic patterns. So if you get up as a 9-to-5er at like 6:30, you're not going to stay up until midnight, or at least you're not reasonably going to stay up until midnight to watch games. So start times suck, but I get it. You got a West Coast thing, so you can't start a game in Oklahoma City at like 4 o'clock. Understood. I get that. You can't start a game in Los Angeles at 4 o'clock. Oklahoma City was a bad example because I think they're Central Time, but
they are.
Still, you can't start that game at 5 o'clock for me to start at 6. You have to kind of make it fit to your market size or to where your market is actually located, but the games have to be good. And when you have this team in Oklahoma City that the major television networks did an awful job, and they are partially to blame for this, They did an awful job of putting Oklahoma City on television and then promoting Oklahoma City as if Oklahoma City was a big deal. The mothership, I don't like watching the mothership's content on a regular basis, I admit. But First Take happens to be on. They are already having conversations of whether or not Oklahoma City is one of the best teams ever. How bottom of the barrel do we get here?
I have a defense for this from one NELL_BTP.
I saw this.
Yes, him and Chris Russell are already getting their arguments underway.
A little too early for this for me, but go ahead.
Listen, I see ESPN and First Take have already run out of all their NBA topics from Chris Russell. Are the Oklahoma City Thunder already an all-time great team? He posted a GIF with Pauly Walnuts that says, "Get the out of here."
Blank.
Yes. And then Linnell responds, "They won 68 games, had the best regular season point differential in NBA history." !
That doesn't make them the best team.
No,
That's
not at all.
You got to win a championship first.
Correct.
You like the championship. This should be coming after the championship. You want to have that after you say, "Is this the greatest seasonal run?" There's a conversation to be had there. I would still say no, but there's a conversation to be had there. You put this Oklahoma City. Look, I'm as new school as you're going to get when it comes to basketball fandom. If you took this Oklahoma City team and put them against like the 96 Bulls, the conversation is going to be over very quickly. It's not going to be the same. The 96 Bulls are going to clear the Thunder. That's just going to be what it is.
Chet
But
Holmgren getting bullied.
They're going to get bullied. It's not going to be like Chet Holmgren going up against any of the Bulls centers at that time. Maybe they'll throw Rodman on him just for funsies.
Yeah.
Like it wouldn't go well. But the conversation surrounding them is just, it's boring because it feels like the people that promote it don't watch it. And then when you have a blowout and Anthony Edwards doesn't play spectacular, he only has 19 points, it makes it all the more difficult. I mean, I turned this thing off at the end of the first quarter. It's like, I'm done. I got to wake up at 4 a.m. I'm not going to stay up to watch this trash because yesterday was trash.
It was.
But the Knicks-Pacers series has been really, really good.
Cinema.
Like there have been games where the way that like you have to stay up for the entirety of it because not only do you want to see the ending, but you want to be involved in the conversation about the ending. That's where the NBA was at its best, at least for me when I was a little bit younger, at the birth of Twitter, when Steph Curry was at his peak, when Durant was at his peak, when LeBron was at their peak, when Steph had that game against Oklahoma City on a Saturday where he hit that shot from like half court, everyone was locked into Twitter. Everyone wanted to be a part of that. It felt like a big deal. The NBA has done an awful job this year in the Western Conference, making it feel like any of the games are a big deal.
No Steph, they don't know what to do.
They don't know how to market new superstars. Life is so easy when you have this dude from Carolina whose dad was an NBA player that is shooting it from 30 feet and doing it 11 times a game. It's really easy to market that, but they don't know how to market new superstars. They're really good at marketing guys that do it all for them because they're just good enough in the way that they play. Well, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is sensational. He's not the most marketable guy, so they got to put a little legwork in there, and they don't know how to do it, which is why you get, are they the best team ever? Maybe they're going to do something about Luka Doncic coming up here on First Take, because we all need to know about what Luka Doncic is doing this offseason. The combination of the promotion by the leagues, where leagues that are in bed with the NBA, the people that are talking about the NBA, and then the actual game being trash. This is a W for those that hate when we talk about basketball on this program. This is a win for them because they get to point and say, see, I told you. And me, someone who's been a defender of the NBA, has to put his hands up and say, yep, I'm going to take the L here. With that said, I'm still excited for the Pacers and Knicks tonight. I have a play on that you'll get before we close up shop here. But coming up next, we're talking Major League Baseball. The Nationals got a big-time win last night, 9-0 over Seattle. Mark Zuckerman is live from Seattle. He will join us on the other side. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton, sitting in for Kevin on the Team 980.
All right, last night, the Nats, they get back in the win column, beating the Seattle Mariners by a score of 9-0. Robert Hassel with his first career home run in the big leagues, and Trevor Williams credited with the win. He had 6 innings pitched, gave up 3 hits and 2 strikeouts. The Thunder, they crushed the hopes and dreams of the Minnesota Timberwolves last night, 124-94. The MVP, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, led OKC with 34 points, 7 rebounds, and 8 assists. The Florida Panthers, they pulled it out in the third period. Caps killer Carter Verhaeghe scored the go-ahead goal. They close out the Canes 5-3, and tonight, the Edmonton Oilers will take on the Dallas Stars at 8 on ESPN, and the Pacers look to finish off the New York Knicks at the Garden tonight at 8 on TNT. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that's what's trending.
Big win for the Nats yesterday. It's the Kevin Sheehan show. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin. Nats got a 9-0 win. Another homer from James Wood. That's 15 on the year. That man is on fire. He's been sensational for the Nationals so far. Let's go live out to Seattle. Mark Zuckerman Masson with us here on the program. Mark, always enjoy having conversations with you and catching up. Hope you're doing well. Last night was a great one for Washington. Your biggest takeaway from the 9-0 win was what?
Just how they completely turned it around from the night before, Denton. I mean, you couldn't draw up a more polar opposite game from the series opener. They lost that one 9-1. They kind of looked lifeless. It was over from the beginning. And then last night they flipped the script. They scored early with back-to-back homers. They kept it going. They got a dominant start out of Trevor Williams for the first time this year. And then they cruised to victory. And it's kind of who this team is, for better or worse. I put out a stat that shows just how dramatic the difference is when they score first versus when the opposition scores first. You can usually tell by like the second inning what kind of night it's going to be. Last night was a good night, and they got off to a great start.
How do they make what we saw last night a little bit more consistent. Maybe not the 9 runs, but they go through big losing streaks, then big winning streaks. And then last night or the night before, it was 9-1, and this time it was 9-0. They were on the right side of it. How do they get more consistent?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a key. Some of it's just going to be experience. Yes, they have a bunch of young players who are still learning in the big leagues how to be a consistent player day in and day out, and it's not as easy as it sounds. So there is some of that, to be sure. I think the biggest thing has got to be when it comes to facing opposing pitchers. Yeah, you love to jump on them the first time through, but it's not always going to happen. You've got to be able to figure out, okay, if I didn't have a good first at bat, what's this guy doing? What kind of adjustments can I make the next time up so that it doesn't just become a fait accompli that if you don't get him early, that you're not going to get him at all. It feels like there's been way too many nights where they get shut down, 6 up, 6 down on 20 pitches. And then when they all come up again, the next time up, nothing changes. And so I think that's something a lot of these guys need to learn how to be better at. Yes, they've had some success late against bullpens coming back, but you don't want to put yourself in that position. You'd rather, at least keep the game close or even take the lead in those middle innings. I think that's probably the next step for these guys to take.
How does the team, and I'm sure this is good, but I'll ask anyway, how does the team feel about James Wood through this portion of the season?
Oh, they don't think he's ever going to amount to anything. He's just, he's a bust. No, I mean, I think everyone's in awe of it. It's really special to see this from a 22-year-old. And the funny thing is, if you've been following this team over the course of 2 decades, it doesn't feel that unusual because we've seen it. We saw it with Bryce Harper. We saw it with Juan Soto. You can go all the way back to Ryan Derman when he was young. Maybe not quite to this extent, but they've been spoiled. We've been spoiled by these young phenoms just bursting onto the scene and looking like superstars right from the get-go. And he, at this point, deserves to be in the same conversation. It doesn't guarantee that he will be over his whole career, but to hit the ball that hard, that consistently, to be able to hit it to all fields, left field, center field, right field, and to put up the kind of numbers he's got. He's on pace now for 44 homers and 118 RBIs. And he's going to challenge. He's not quite on enough pace yet, but he could challenge both those team records. Alfonso Soriano hit 46 homers way back in 2006, and then Anthony Rendon drove in 124 runs in the World Series here in 2019. And this kid at age 22 is on a pace to be right on par with some of the best seasons that this team's ever had.
Are people across Major League Baseball starting to look at him maybe a little differently? Not quite as a superstar, but a burgeoning superstar in the league?
Yeah, it's been fun to go around the league this year and see some of the visiting, or in this case, the home media, like in Seattle. And they've heard of him, and they kind of have a sense, oh, yeah, this is the big name guy in the team. And then they see him in person, and they're like, whoa, this guy is legit. That has absolutely been fun to see. And I was talking with someone last night that we're starting to get close to the point where we're going to be hearing about the All-Star game. Certainly, I have a hard time believing if he's healthy that he wouldn't be selected for it. But there's also going to be a question of the home run derby, I think, at this point. And I'm sure MLB would love to have a young 22-year-old burgeoning star in a marquee event like that. It may then come down to whether James and whether the Nationals wanted to participate in it. I hope he does, because I think that would be a great opportunity for anyone who's left out there that hasn't heard of him or doesn't fully understand who he is, to get a chance to see him, on the biggest stage like that with the biggest superstars in the game and really put on a show.
Does he have the personality and charisma to be on that stage and flourish as a superstar?
Well, you saw the Papa John's commercial, right? Some brilliant acting from him in that new pizza commercial. He's not a big personality, and you can't force that. He's going to have to be who he is. He's very calm and collected. He's a nice kid. He's not rude. He's almost overly polite. But no, he's not Bryce Harper, certainly, or Juan Soto when it comes to that kind of thing. And so maybe superstardom won't come as easily to him, and maybe he won't embrace it as much. But seriously, watch that commercial, and it just debuted yesterday. He hit a home run, of course, so that people get 50% off pizza because of it. There's like a subtle, wink, wink, kind of like, yeah, I know I'm not this overly dramatic, big personality guy, but I can have some fun with that too. And, I think he'll grow into it, I think, over time.
Mark Zuckerman with us here on the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton Day sitting in for Kevin. Also last night, Mark, Robert Hassel hit his first homer in the bigs. Is he going to go back down when Cruz comes back up, or are they going to send somebody else down?
Well, it's up to him, really, and I guess Dalen Lyle to that extent too, to kind of put the pressure on. And if they perform well enough, then by the time Dylan Cruz and Jacob Young as well, when they're ready to come back, there's going to be some decisions to make. If he has some more games like last night, he's going to find his way to stay up here. It was the home run is great, of course, first career one, but I think he was more impressed with the RBI single earlier in the game. He comes up with 2 outs. He's down on the count 0-2. He gets it to a 2-2 count and does what really throughout his minor league career he had shown he could do, and that's take a good quality at bat and hit the ball to the opposite field and then drive in a run, because it was at that point it was still a close game, so kind of a key moment for him. And I think that more than anything is an indication of who he can be. The home run's great, and if he gets the right pitch, he can do that with it. But for him to stick up here, he's going to have to be able to show really what his natural swing is, which is to hit the ball to the opposite field. So far, so good. I mean, he had been in a little bit of a slump. It's only 6 games, I think. But last night, and he admitted this, he sort of felt more like himself again. And I think a big part of that was hitting actually 2 singles to the opposite field, including the RBI single.
If he does stay up when Cruz and Young get back, or maybe Lyle stays, maybe they keep 4 or 5 of them up, is James Wood the guy that would move maybe to first base and keep the other guys out in the outfield, or how would that rotation work back there?
Well, yeah, I don't see first base, not at this stage. I mean, they're really happy with what Daniel Lowe has done there. I think the DH question comes into play at that point. We have seen that when Josh Bell gets a night off, that James Wood generally has been the DH. And I think he's done it like 12 times maybe now. And he's had a lot of success in those spots. But I think they need to be really careful with this. You don't want to pigeonhole a 22-year-old into a DH role this early in his career. Yes, he is the inferior defensive outfielder compared to the other guys who are all really good. But you want in the long run for him to be comfortable enough in the outfield that you can put him out there on a regular basis and not just say, okay, you're going to be a DH for your entire career. So I'll be interested to see how that all plays out. I could see a scenario where they ultimately have, say, 4 quality outfielders, and I would hope they would use the DH position to kind of rotate them all around and give everybody a chance to maybe take a day, a half day off, as you call it, where you're still engaged in the game and still hitting, but you're not on your feet as much. You're not in the outfield as much. I'd rather see that than them just pick one guy to do it. Now, Josh Bell will have a say in that as well, and he finally had a big night last night. He needed it.
Yeah.
3 hits, big home run. I'm not going to declare anything with him until he does this over a longer stretch, but he desperately needed that one, and maybe, to stave off these questions that we're having right now.
What was the response now that it's been a couple of days inside the clubhouse, around the organization, about the scathing Ken Rosenthal piece about how long this rebuild has taken?
I think a lot of people had a similar reaction to me, which was, yeah, there were a lot of valid points in there, but why now? That felt like something that could have been written 2 years ago, even 3 years ago, and would have been just as relevant, as opposed to right now when, sure, they have a lot of work still to do. They still have to prove a lot that they can finish the job on this thing. But I think anybody objectively would look at the situation that the Nats are in right now and say they're in a much better position than they've been since the rebuild began. And that, they're drafting and developing, while a major problem for a long time, appears to be getting better. That the young talent they put on a field now on a nightly basis is, way better than where they were not that long ago. And arguably, this is the most young talent they've ever put on the field at the same time, even in the years that they were winning as much as they were. A lot of that was free agents and more veteran players. This is all young talent that's either homegrown or acquired via trades. So I think the feeling is they're in a much better position now than they had been. So why pick on them now for that. It seems like those points could have been made a while back. And frankly, a lot of us in the DC media had been making that point for a while. It's almost like Ken Rosenthal, who is a great writer. He's the most respected guy in my business. So and I can only imagine how hard it is to keep tabs on 30 teams and be an expert on 30 teams.
Right.
But it kind of felt like a guy who maybe hasn't paid much attention to the Nationals since the Soto trade, finally getting caught up on things.
Yeah, I had a similar thought. I was like, if you would have written this, a year or two ago, I guess it would have made sense. But it feels like, especially the way that James Wood is playing now, the homegrown talent is rising as the team is expected to rise.
Right, and I mean, include C.J. Abrams, Mackenzie Gore. I know Dylan Cruz hasn't been everything he could be, but there's still good positive signs there. And even, when it comes to the drafting and developing, which I said was, yes, a major concern and maybe the biggest reason that they did trade Soto, because they had not done a good enough job of bringing up that next wave of young players. But look at where we are right now, where Brady House and Cade Cavalli, a couple of first-round picks, are on the verge of making it up here and looking like they could be something big. They have the number one pick this summer. They are developing guys who weren't blue-chip first-round picks like Jake Irvin, even Jacob Young and Mitchell Parker to an extent. So I thought it came across as someone who maybe hasn't been paying as much attention recently to the strides they have made in all those areas. I think the Nationals internally realized where they were failing in a lot of ways and have taken some steps to try to get better at that. Now, they still need to finish the job. And, if at the end of this year, we're still talking about a team that's winning 70 games and hasn't taken that next step. And if ownership doesn't at some point here start giving Mike Rizzo the resources that they used to give him, then I think it's fair to come back to all these points and say, is it ever going to happen again? But right now, I think we're kind of in that middle ground where you're not sure. And you can say, like, in general, I feel like the trajectory of the organization is on the up right now, not on the down.
Is there a magic number to keep Davey going into 2026? I know he signed a 2-year extension in 2023. That would be up at the end of this year with a club option for 26. Is he going to be the guy that takes this next step with the organization when they're ready to?
I've felt all along going into this year that there should be pressure, not just on Davey, but really on everyone in the organization to show real improvement this year. Now, I mean, yeah, it comes down to wins and losses, and you'd like to think that has something to do with it. And, the hope would be that they are close to, if not even surpassing the 500 mark, although I don't know if it has to boil down to that. I think there is a scenario where they win 76, 77 games, something like that. And maybe you're disappointed with the record, but you can honestly look at the improvement on the field and the talent they have and say, okay, yeah, things are still going in the right direction. That's we want to keep this group together. But yeah, I felt like coming into this year, this is a critical year. It's time for that rebuild to move into a winning direction. And, they have the young players now that make you believe that it should be better. You should be seeing better results. They're not all the way there yet, as I said, but another 71 kind of win season, it could be tough to make the argument that everyone, and that's not just David, that's a lot of people, that everyone deserves to continue on this path. They've been given the time now to bring this team back from the dead. And it's time to see the results on the field.
Well, hopefully tonight the results look a lot like they did yesterday. Mark, appreciate the time as always, my friend. Enjoy your time out there out west.
All right, you got it. Thank you, Denton.
That is Mark Zuckerman of Masson, who is good enough to jump on with us here. He's there in Seattle. The Nats in action tonight, 9:40. It'll be on FS1 on television. You'll hear it on our sister station, 106.7, The Fan, taking on the Mariners before they head still out west, but down south to take on the Arizona Diamondbacks. Coming up next, there's been a lot of changes in college football. There's a lot more changes on the horizon in college football. Sheehan Jayaraja from CBS Sports going to join us to make sense of it all and what is the next logical step for the fate of college football. Don't go anywhere. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton Day on the Team 980. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin on the Team 980. You can find me on Twitter at the Denton Day. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, go ahead and do that. You see this program live 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. every Monday through Friday. Then you get Craig Hoffman 4 to 7. You get some Denton's Office mixed in between there as well. You know that this is the program that loves itself some college football. Myself and Kevin each love it. I know Max is a college football guy as well. So let's talk some college football. Sheehan Jayaraja from CBS Sports is kind enough to give us a few moments here on a Thursday. Sheehan, always good to catch up, my friend. It has been a busy and hectic offseason, I'm sure, to put it lightly, but how are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I appreciate you having me back on.
So let's talk about the biggest news, at least so far, of the offseason, the adjustment to the seeding in the college football playoff. It felt like it was going to happen eventually. We just didn't know when. What do you think of straight seeding the 12 teams?
Yeah, I think it's probably the right decision. And look, I was somebody who was as vocal as anybody about the fact that I wanted to make sure that there were real serious rewards for conference championships. And certainly that was the case last year. I'd argue that we had the best conference championship weekend that we've had in a very long time. But I do think at the same time, once we actually got into the playoffs, it was kind of obvious. We had an unbalanced bracket. Of course, the teams 5 through 8 all beat the teams 1 through 4. They obviously were also rewarded with home playoff games that the conference champions were not. So I do think that ultimately it does make sense to move to a straight seeding model. Last year, of course, the top 4 teams would have all been from the Big Ten and the SEC, but I do think that it was a little bit of an anomalous year from that perspective. I mean, I look even into 2025, I expect Clemson to be in that conversation. I think Miami could easily get into that conversation. Maybe you have a Big 12 team jump up. But I do think that ultimately it's the right decision, and it'll make for the most, not just the best product possible, but I think also the fairest bracket possible.
Do you think this decision was done more for some of the things that you just relayed, or was it done more for some of the things that the Boise State athletic director relayed on Twitter, which is just to punish the small guy?
Yeah, I mean, and it's a great question, right? I mean, I think that it's a combination of the two. I mean, look, the reality is we had the first round of playoff games over the course of 2 days, and many of them, of course, were up against NFL games. And very few of them ended up being competitive. And so I do think that, that's, I think, part of it. I mean, one of the things that I think could be a benefit is, I think if we had done straight seeding last year, we would have gotten a Boise State, Indiana playoff game, which would have been a great opportunity to showcase both those programs in a game that obviously both of them would have had the chance to win. And so I think that that's part of it. I think that, again, just the fact that the bracket was so unbalanced. And I think that, when you're talking about, the seeding, I mean, there were teams that definitely were a little more excited about being the 5 seed than the possibility of being the 1 seed. And obviously that ended up being worst case scenario with the 1 seed Oregon having to play Ohio State, who went on to win the national title. But I do think that people felt kind of the disconnect between the top of the bracket, middle of the bracket, and lower part of the bracket. And again, we'll see how it looks in 2015, but I think that it's probably going to project as something that makes a little more sense.
Do you feel like that some of the changes that are happening a little too fast?
Well, I think that the thing that is unfortunate is just how reactionary all of this is. And some of this was always going to happen. And what I mean by that is, this contract that the college football playoff had, it only existed for 2 more years when they did make the change to an expanded playoff. And so, it means that max, we were going to get 2 years of an unchanged system before we had to enter into a brand new contract starting with the 2026 playoff. But, I think it's interesting, right? Because what if Arizona State gets a 4th down stop and all of a sudden the 4 seed beat the 5 seed and they were obviously rewarded and proved that they deserved to be there. And I think that, frankly, Boise State and Arizona State proved that they deserved to be in that conversation for a top 4 seed as well. So, no, I do think that we are being very reactionary right now. I will also say I think that that's going to be a relatively short-term thing because in 2026, we're going to have a new playoff contract that's going to extend a couple of years. And so I don't expect as many changes in that short run. The reality is with some of the 24-25 changes, is that it's also part of negotiating for 2026 and beyond, giving in maybe in some areas to compensate in other areas. So I do think that this is a temporary state of being, but I really do hope, like you kind of mentioned, that we don't just end up in this reactionary doom spiral every single year where we're trying to adjust for tiny things that really aren't that big a deal.
Sheehan Jayaraja, my guest here on the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton Day, sitting in for Kevin here on the team 980. We got SEC meetings going on in Florida, and you mentioned the idea of a negotiating process coming up in the near future. Will that be a negotiation, or is that just going to be Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti telling everybody else what's going to happen?
I mean, it's essentially like been explicitly stated as that. They had essentially a memorandum that they sent out last year where they said, essentially the SEC and the Big Ten are going to be the ones who decide what we do moving forward. Now, I think that what's always interesting about power struggles and about monopolies is, they aren't necessarily the best thing long-term for the quality of your product because, again, like if you're in a situation, let's just use, for example, the 4 auto bids as a proxy for this. Like you're in a situation where all of a sudden people aren't really following the playoff race because why does it actually matter if so many teams are already guaranteed to be in? Why does a conference championship race matter? Why does a late season, group kind of matter? And so I do think that some of this stuff and some of this power will end up not maybe being as valuable long-term as these conferences want it to be. And again, look, here's the reality, right? Like, I think that, back in 2023, Florida State as an undefeated conference champion missed it. Like, I think people rightfully felt pretty bad about that. I don't think anybody should feel even a little bit bad about Alabama ending up as the first team out as a 3-loss team with losses to Vanderbilt and Oklahoma, who both would not have made bowl games if they didn't beat Alabama. And so, I think that some of these echoes are going to fall on deaf ears, and even on the auto bid situation, right? Like I think that last year that was proposed, and it was largely shot down because of backlash from fans and media and partners. And so I think that they're at real risk of overplaying some of their hands. And so it'll be kind of interesting to see in the next couple of weeks and months, I guess, ultimately, like, to make a comparison, right? It's the dog catching the car. It's, hey, you have all the power and influence that you ever wanted. Do you actually even know what you want to do with this?
I'm looking at some of the stuff that we have seen from SEC media days, and whether he wants to be or not, whether he should be or not, it does feel like Lane Kiffin is somewhat influential, or at least has enough of a voice to make people care about some of the things he said. And it seems like Sheehan, over the course of the last couple of days, he's reunited with the love of his life. Good for him. He's reunited with sworn enemy Paul Feinbaum, and he is leading the charge for no auto bids, or at least he's been very vocal about no auto bids, no auto qualifiers. Do you think we're more likely in 2026 to get 12 teams with no auto bids, or have the playoff expand to 16 teams?
Well, I think that those two things aren't necessarily tied. I think that we are very likely to move to 16 teams regardless of what the system looks like. And one reason for that actually is, I think last year, right, we have the auto bids, and then on top of that, we have the buys. And all 4 teams that had buys ended up losing. And the other part of that, too, is that none of the 4 teams that got buys got the benefit of a home playoff game. And those ended up being awesome. I mean, the atmosphere is there, the energy around campus. Also, by the way, like something that really added to it was like you had Tennessee fans try to travel up to, to try to take over, Ohio Stadium. I think that's great. I think that's great for the sport that people are trying to even organize things like that. So I think that 16 will allow us to have 8 home playoff games, which I think that people are, that top schools I think are really going to be excited about. So that's one piece of it. When you start talking about the 5 auto bids and 11 at large, I mean, look, I think that, you mentioned Lane Kiffin has a very outsized voice, I think partially because he's willing to use it. And you look at a lot of the other coaches in the Big Ten and SEC, they really don't say a whole lot. They really don't give away a whole lot. Well, that creates a little bit of a power vacuum that Lane Kiffin can step into. But I think the other piece, too, is like if you're an SEC team, I mean, again, it's cool, the idea that, hey, we get 4 guaranteed. And look, especially coming off of a year where you only got 3 teams into the field, which is kind of crazy. Like, yeah, having that baseline, I think, is one thing. But the baseline of 4, I think, is more important to the middle tier and lower tier teams in the Big Ten and SEC. For the top teams, like, I don't think that they're scared to compete. I don't think that Ole Miss is scared to try to be a top 16 team like they were last year. I don't think Alabama, Georgia are scared about trying to be a top 16 team. I think it's more South Carolina. I think it's more Kentucky. I think it's more, some Missouri that would love to try to shoot for the goal of being a top 4 SEC team, more than necessarily trying to be a top 16 team in the country. So I think that even in these rooms, and this is true, I'm sure, in the Big Ten as well, there's some disagreement about how to best approach it because, again, like, everybody's situation is ultimately so different.
Do you think we'll see, as we get closer to whatever change is coming next, that more coaches will start to be a little bit more outspoken? Like, it has felt like, Sark has done some more interviews this offseason. Even Ryan Day, who is like, he's a mystery, it seems like, most off seasons, but he started to do more interviews. Do you think we'll see some of these coaches become maybe not quite Lane Kiffin, where they just go on like binge rage tweets, it feels like, but they'll at least start to speak more on these things?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because I think that go back 5 years and, 2019, 2018, 2020, that time frame, you have these established superstar coaches. Nick Saban, right? He has the right and ability to talk. Dabo Swinney, who still is around, but obviously is not at the peak of his powers anymore. He had the right to talk. We kind of lost that whole generation. I'll even throw Jim Harbaugh into that. We kind of lost like the clear-cut top voices in college football in a very short amount of time. We obviously see this too on the basketball side with Coach K, Roy Williams, et cetera, all retiring at a similar time and kind of having this generation change. So I think that that's part of why we've seen some quiet in the past 2 to 3 years, is because it's been a transitionary time. And you mentioned some of the voices who are stepping up now. I mean, Kirby Smart has been one who's been a little bit more vocal in recent years. Steve Sarkisian, like you mentioned, kind of moving into that top group. Ryan Day, now a national championship coach, moving into that top group. I think that's going to be part of it, is as some of these younger coaches start to take over the sport per se, I think that we will start to see more of their voices come to the forefront. I mean, because again, you look around, let's just take the SEC, for example, right now. I mean, Greg Sankey right now is the most powerful voice in that room. That wasn't the case a couple of years ago. It was Nick Saban. Now, Kirby Smart can elevate himself to being as powerful or more powerful a voice. I think Steve Sarkisian is heading in that direction. Like you mentioned, Lane Kiffin is willing to try to compete, but again, I think that like Brian Kelly isn't necessarily somebody who has the right to be a bigger voice in that room necessarily. And so as some of these coaches have more success, as you have more coaches win national championship like Ryan Day in the Big Ten, I think it does change the dynamics and will allow some of these coaches to be a bit more vocal.
So we will circle back around to the topics at hand in terms of what the future looks like and all that sort of stuff. But I do want to ask you about the story that you wrote yesterday. We're talking with Sheehan Jayaraja, CBS Sports, CBSSports.com, covering college football, on offensive lines. I think this is fascinating. I'm in the process of reading through all of it, so I haven't gotten quite through all of it yet, but I think the concept is really, really intriguing. What did you learn when kind of compiling the data and talking with people around college football about the depth of the offensive line position across the country?
Well, I think to preface this story is I think that offensive line play and slipping offensive line play has been one of the defining stories of football in the past 5 to 10 years. And furthermore, I think it's one of the hardest stories to try to contextualize, because you can count how many yards a quarterback throws for, or, how many times you hand the ball off. It's just harder to quantify and find empirical data on offensive line play, which I think makes it just a more complicated story. And so that was what I really set out to do this offseason, was try to sit down and see if I could figure that out a little bit. And talking to people around the sport, there's a couple pieces of this, right? The biggest one that I got into in my story over at CBSSports.com is I think that the transfer portal and NIL has impacted every position, but it's really impacted offensive linemen in a specific way. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, I mean, it's harder to keep as many linemen as you did before. And, you know, you need one or two really good quarterbacks on your roster to be a good team. Well, you need like 8 offensive linemen to really even have a chance to have a good line, and probably more than that as well. And so just keeping that amount of players with the relative financial value of these players at this point has just never been more difficult, because you have a kid go through for 1 year and maybe they're getting poached by a team who's willing to pay them just a little bit more. You know, I got a quote from Sam Pittman, who's one of the greatest offensive line coaches of all time, now the coach at Arkansas, who was like, God dang, man, like I have kids coming into my office who played 2 games last year, and I don't even know if they're good, and they're getting offers from other places for a lot of money. And so I think that's one piece of it, is just, you know, offensive line play is so dependent on development over multiple years. And you just really don't have the luxury of having guys for multiple years anymore and creating these good units consistently. The other piece too, I think, is that, you know, from a literal coaching perspective, like, again, you lose the development piece, and you also lose the consistency and camaraderie piece. And, you know, when you're talking about offensive line play, and again, like when you watch casually on TV, you don't always notice all the little details with it, but like offensive line play is all about communication and positioning. And if you don't know where the guy on your left is supposed to be, or if you don't know how to tell the guy on your right that, hey, this guy's coming from this angle, if you can't do that efficiently, then you make mistakes. And with offensive line play specifically, if you make one mistake on the offensive line, it's basically a drive killer. If a wide receiver drops a pass, you know, it's a bad play and you go on and do the next play. If an offensive lineman fails, that's a sack or a tackle for loss. And all of a sudden you're behind the sticks, and it changes the entire complexion of the drive. So anyway, all this to say, I think that, you know, this is a defining issue right now in college football. And again, I think that, you know, I got a chance to talk with Miami's offensive line coach, Alex Mirabal, about it. And, you know, Miami has invested as much money, first of all, into their roster as anybody over the past couple of years, but a huge amount of their investment has gone into the offensive line position. They've had very few players relatively transfer. And I think that that's actually one of the reasons they were able to jump from a pretty good team to one that was on the edge of the playoff last year. And I think will continue to only rise in 2025.
It's so interesting. One of the points that you made about, you know, like the 2 games, and how many times do we hear that across every position? But a guy that's played 2 games coming into your office, I don't know if he's good, but someone's going to pay him X amount of money. We're like 4 or 5 years into this NIL transfer portal thing, and still no coach seems to like have it fully mastered. It's crazy.
No, it's really, really difficult. And I mean, the thing is too, is like, I want people to understand, especially when we look back at this era of, let's say, 21 through 24, like this was the true Wild West. Like this was the true, there are no rules. You can throw any amount of money around. There's no inhibiting on transfers. There's no commitment to binding commitment to being there for a few years. Like, and I mean, God bless the kids who took advantage of it, right? There's more money being thrown around. I would guess at this point, it might be the most money that will ever be thrown around in college football, just because, again, there's no rules. And a lot of people understand, hey, maybe we can take advantage of this specific moment. But I mean, look, you look at any other sport, there just isn't a sport that has perpetual free agency. And I don't think that you can have a healthy sport where you have that. Now, you know, look, I'm around the Big 12 conference a lot because of my background in Texas. I think that the Big 12 is the conference that's starting to understand, hey, our advantage is we can use our money to retain our own players. We don't necessarily need to use it to go out and get other players to fill holes, because maybe we don't actually, maybe we won't actually benefit from doing that. And another piece of this as well is that my colleague over at CBS Sports, Chris Hummer, did a study, and obviously it's a number that needs a lot of context, but top 247 kids who transferred top 247 kids who did not transfer were 5 times as likely to be drafted into the NFL as kids who did transfer. Now, again, that's a number that needs a lot of context. And, obviously a kid who's not succeeding is going to transfer more than a kid who's succeeding. But it's also context that, hey, you know what? Maybe it's also bad for players long-term to be in this state of perpetual movement as well.
Sheehan, I appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoy the rest of the off season before we get things kicked up and rolling in a couple of weeks.
Thank you so much for having me. That
is Sheehan J. Araja, CBS Sports, covering college football at the national level. You can find him on Twitter at Sheehan J. Araja. His conversations are always a lot of fun. We've had a lot of conversations surrounding the transfer portal and name, image, and likeness here on this program. Kevin and I feel very similar about it. It is madness in, getting to be around college coaches and people that are around college programs the way that I am. Nobody has gotten this thing down. It feels like you can if you're a parent, you understand this. Maybe I shouldn't be making this reference because I'm not a parent, but it feels like you're putting out a lot of fires or you're cleaning up a lot of messes that your children make. Like, you understand if you have an infant or a toddler or a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, whatever, they're going to spill things. Things are going to get thrown across the room. They're going to leave areas of the house a little messy, and it's your job to be the parent to go and clean it up. It feels like that's what college coaches are doing. You understand issues are going to arise, that people are going to come into your office, say, Coach, so-and-so's paying me X amount of money. And whether that number is actually true, because I do think that there is a lot of guys across the country that are fabricating numbers in an effort to get money from their current establishment, thinking to themselves that if their current establishment says no, that they might actually be worth that on an open market, which very, very few times has that ever come into fruition. And coaches have talked a lot about this, but with 4 or 5 years into it, nobody has seemed to master the concept of how to behave in name, image, and likeness. And I would think that 4 to 5 years into this is a good amount of data to accumulate. Now, I'll tie that back into the problem at hand elsewhere in the sport. The college football playoff is changing way too rapidly. If we have 4 to 5 years of data surrounding name, image, and likeness, transfer portal, and how coaches can kind of operate in that, we're making drastic changes to the sport and just the overall hierarchy of the sport with a year. We've had like 6 playoff games in the 12 or like, what was it? I guess it was 8 if you count the numbers down. We had like 8 playoff games in the 12-team model, and we're already making big adjustments. Now, I think it's fair to suggest that the straight seeding was going to happen eventually, but then some of the other changes that are on the horizon, no auto bids, expanding the postseason, you're making a lot of drastic changes very, very quickly before you actually get to see the ins and outs. 8 games is not enough to get an idea for what the future is going to look like. You need more information. I didn't mind staying at 4 for as long as they stayed at 4 in the college football playoff model, because you knew this is what you're trying out. And then eventually when that contract is done, you will then expand. I thought it would be to 8. They decided to go to 12, but they did that over 8 years. They did it 2 years short. They had a 10-year contract. They did it after 8 years. They did it a little short, but you had like 6, 7, 8 years in this model to say, all right, we like this. We don't like this. Here's what we want to change. Now they're making changes incredibly rapidly. And I think you lose a little bit of traction, and it opens you up when you move too fast, just like anything in life. When you start moving too fast, mistakes are much more prone to be made, and that results in a big, big problem. And eventually, once the toothpaste is out of the tube, you are not getting it back in there. We've seen that with name, image, and likeness. I'm fearful that maybe the college football playoff will be the next in line where things are just going to get out of control and there won't be any sort of fixing. In about 20 minutes, you will hear from Jaden Daniels yesterday, and something that I'm getting a little uncomfortable with on social media as it relates to Jaden Daniels. But if I'm sitting in for Kevin, we're going to do a little bit of daily news. So we got some daily news coming up next, including something that people are paying their real money for that you will not believe. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton, sitting in for Kevin on the Team 980. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin here on a Thursday. Back with you tomorrow as well. Kevin is back from vacation on Monday. In about 15 minutes, I'm getting a little weirded out by how people are examining photos of Jaden Daniels. I will explain that in 15 minutes. But first, let's get to some daily news. It's been a while since we've done this on the program, Max. I'm going to start with an absolute banger. This is going to smack you in the face. Maybe it's a little too close to home. I don't know, but I'll let you comment on it once I give you the story. I had to double and triple check this to make sure it was real, by the way, and that I wasn't getting like NBA senteled by another, brand, if you will. Sydney Sweeney is selling her bathwater
Really?
in the form of soap.
Really?
The way everyone's head in the fishbowl perked up was a little alarming.
Yeah, did you hear my really?
Yeah, but you got a little excited there. Maybe you're into Sydney Sweeney's bathwater soap, but she is selling her literal bathwater as soap.
Huh. Okay. Listen, I've seen weirder things get sold.
I have seen weirder things, but this one is being sold commercially. I think this is one of the weirder things sold commercially.
Who's doing? Is this a Dr. Squatch thing?
I believe that is the brand. Yes,
Okay.
It is a Dr. Squatch. It is a limited edition.
Very
I guess
limited.
she only
I'm sure.
takes a certain amount of baths. I don't know what that process is like, but is a limited edition soap that is made with literal bathwater from Sydney Sweeney. Fire this country into the sun. This is, if you are buying bath soap from Sydney Sweeney to then scrub all over your body, that is a level of simping I cannot comprehend. It is not masculine. It is weird AF.
I'm just imagining the logistics behind this. Like, no, Sydney, you can't get out yet. We need at least 2 more hours in this bath.
We need a certain time of you in the bath to properly get the bath water to the degree that we need it.
Oh,
I mean, she's going to make her money. Good for her.
She's going to make a boatload.
She's going to make a boatload out of this. And good for her in the process. But again, you are a sick human being if you are going to buy that as soap and then scrub it all over yourself. There are different lifestyles. We talked about Stephon Diggs' lifestyle he's living. I understand. My lifestyle might not be your lifestyle. Yours might not be mine. It's certainly not if you are intrigued by buying bathwater from Sydney Sweeney. But I saw this and I was just like, this cannot be real.
You think Chris Russell's intrigued by this?
Can we get Chris Russell in here?
I don't know. He just walked by. That's why
he just walked by. So we might send somebody to go get Chris Russell to get his thoughts on Sydney Sweeney's bathwater soap.
Sure.
I would hope that as crazy as Chris Russell is, he is not intrigued by that.
I don't think he will be, but I'm curious to ask him the question.
I'm curious. Can you send one of the 3 of you to go retrieve Chris Russell while I filibuster on talking about Sydney Sweeney and her bathwater? I mean, by the way, the labeling actually looks great. It's called like Bathwater Bliss.
Ooh.
That is the name of the, I mean, it'll be blissful. It'll certainly be blissful. I cannot comprehend that some executive, that had to be a weird conversation. Like, hey, so we're going to sit you down for a meeting and we are going to sell your bathwater.
So, I imagine the conversation started with, so OnlyFans, right? And you know how people sell their bathwater. And she went, they what?
She's like, that's real?
That's a real thing?
I thought that was just something weird that people put on my Instagram comments or my Instagram messages. It looks like Chris Russell is giving pushback, which means Chris Russell is not going to join. And I'm sure he has like a podcast that he has to tape, but I'm instead going to take that as we have found a story that is too weird for Chris Russell.
Agreed. I think he doesn't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole.
He does not want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. I'm stunned, actually. I have to be honest. All right, story number 2. I came across something that I actually found to be fascinating. Are you a cruise person? I am a big cruise person. My family is huge when it comes to cruises. I found a cruise that is available. It is a lifetime membership kind of a deal in which you can pay $1 million to buy a residence on a Blue Zone cruise. Do you like cruises just period in general?
Never been on one.
Okay, so I would not start with a lifetime cruise.
My mom is staunchly anti-cruise, but she gets seasick, so that's a thing for her. So we're not a cruise family, but I'm open to it. I've heard I've heard cruises can be interesting but isolating, and eventually you just get tired of being on the boat.
You get tired of being on the boat, which is something about this particular story that I found to be maybe the most fascinating, because it's a lifetime sort of deal. So it's a lifetime Blue Zone cruise. It's run by the MV Narrative. It's their first ever Blue Zone cruise that's inspired by the diet and exercise and lifestyle habits of the Mediterranean, which is known for exceptional longevity. And things offered on this cruise are heavily plant-based diets, an all-inclusive gym spa situation. Normally when you go on a cruise, you got to pay extra for like certain spa things, but you pay that all in one big fee. So you get like hydrotherapy, infrared spas, which are a thing that people do. I don't know the benefits of infrared spas.
I don't think they
will
work.
Take somebody else's word for it. But you can get all of these things. They have weight loss supplements on there, which literally the article says a copycat version of Ozempic, which red flag. I'm going to need a little bit more information on this copycat version.
Yeah, you're doing a copycat version of Ozempic on international waters.
Like just being, it's the same thing. I've been told that with things before. Have you ever had store brand Doritos? It's the same thing. It is not the same thing. It is not the same thing. So I was a little perturbed by that, but I did like some deep diving on this because I'm a cruise person. I like going on cruises. The longest I've ever been on one is 7 days. So 60 years might be a little too much for me. That's a big jump to make in one foul swoop. But I looked at like the boat. The boat is fascinating. It's only 530 rooms compared to 2,000 on a regular cruise ship. There's like schools on there, so it's like Sweet Life on deck if you watch that show. The issue that I had with this, big Sweet Life guy,
big Sweet Life guy.
The issue that I had with this, Max, is it feels a little too utopian. There's it's like your own little civilization on a boat. One, if you hate people, you got to figure that out.
Yeah.
Because like they're not going nowhere. You're not going nowhere. There's too much money at stake. There's literally a helicopter pad at the top of the boat because that's the kind of money that you're dealing with. Like these are oil tycoons that want to get away from somebody. So I'm just going to live on a boat for 60 years. It feels a little too utilitarian and utopian for me. It gives me the heebie-jeebies. Like it's like Wall-E. You're on this own little like civilization. And what happens? You're in the middle of the ocean and World War III breaks out. Your home's gone. Now your boat is the home. I was reading it. I was like, wow, this is cool. They have a recording studio. That's sick. As if I need to do a recording studio. Like I'm a rapper of some kind.
You got to record your podcast.
I could record a podcast. Maybe that's it. You know what? That actually could be great. Here's a content idea for my bosses that are great people. If they want to spend $1 million to put me on a cruise for a year, where I can come back looking shredded because of the copycat Ozempic, assuming it doesn't stop my heart and kill me.
Not in a year.
Hopefully. Two maybe. So we'll cap it at a year then. But the other thing, the other issue that I had with this in doing the research, because I got a brochure emailed to me. They have my email now. I'm serious about this. All of the stuff on the brochure was computer generated in that it's not like it was actual pictures of the ship. So not only does this have like this weird utopian feel, it also feels a little Fire Festy. I don't need no Fire Fest in my life.
Yeah, I'm starting to take a closer look at the pictures that are on this CNBC article.
Yeah, it's a little weird.
They are very AI.
It's very, very AI. And that feels like a scam, a Ponzi scheme waiting to happen. Give me $1 million. And then by the time you show up to the ship port, the ship ain't there because it never was there. Maybe it's a little boat. Could not be me.
Little dinghy.
Little dinghy. Like the concept is cool. I'll be the second class that goes on. The first class, I'm good. Send Katy Perry. She wants to be the first of things. Katy Perry, go live on a boat for a year, and let me know how it turns out. All right, coming up next, I'm a little weirded out by some of the stuff surrounding Jaden Daniels. I will share why, and you'll hear some conversation from the coaches about this particular topic when we get back. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton Day on the Team 980.
All right, the Washington Nationals get back in the win column last night, beating the Seattle Mariners by a score of 9-0. James Wood hit his 15th home run of the season. Robert Hassel with his first career home run in the big leagues. Trevor Williams credited with the win. He pitched 6 innings, gave up 3 hits, and earned 2 strikeouts. The Thunder, they crushed the hopes and dreams of the Minnesota Timberwolves, 124-94. The MVP, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, led OKC with 34 points, 7 rebounds, and 8 assists. The Florida Panthers, they pulled it out in the third period. The Caps killer Carter Verhaeghe scores the go-ahead goal as they close out the Canes 5-3 tonight. The Oilers will take on the Stars at 8 p.m. on ESPN, and the Pacers look to finish off the New York Knicks at the Garden tonight at 8 on TNT. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type of the Team 980, and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports, and that's what's trending.
It's the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton Day sitting in for Kevin on the Team 980. Jaden Daniels, Dan Quinn, and Cliff Kingsbury all spoke yesterday. I have noticed something a little odd on social media. And I understand the premise of these conversations, Max. I do. It doesn't make it less weird. We saw that picture of Jaden Daniels from OTAs last week, or I don't know if it was OTAs in specific, but it was a workout at the team facilities wearing the yellow jersey. He looked jacked. Like, whoa, those arms, a lot bigger. He's put on a little bit of weight. Everybody wanted him to bulk up. It looks like he's bulking up. That was cool. That was fine. It was one picture. It was very clear. He is jacked. It is now officially weird, and it is going to be weird, and it's going to get weirder when every time we see a new picture of Jaden Daniels, people are going to comment on how much he's bulking up, what his arms look like. It is going to get weird, and it might get borderline uncomfortable. I don't like the social media, the social media people coming to actually. It looks like he's gained 7 pounds. Like I'm good. I don't need him to. I don't need you to get on his scale for him. I don't need any of that. So here's Jaden Daniels yesterday speaking about his plans for getting bigger.
I was just in the weight room, just working out. You're always trying to improve in different areas, but I don't know what to say about that. Just let the people talk about it.
And he is weirded out by it too. Not used to, and he shouldn't be used to, doesn't want to get used to having pictures of him basically be like, not psychoanalyzed, but physioanalyzed. Like, it's very, very weird. Again, that first one made sense because we hadn't seen him for a couple of months. He went to Paris. He's just enjoying the offseason. And when we did see him, we saw him at a women's basketball game supporting Juju Watkins, and he is, sleeves on, right? Can't see his arms, sleeves on. At that point, it was March, kind of cold. He got a jacket on, whatever, right? Just normal March attire. But then you start to see the pictures where you can see his arms, and everyone's getting deep into it about like, oh, look at how much bigger he is and all these things. Is very weird. I don't need an entire offseason of constantly being barraged with photos of my quarterback being like, look at how much bigger he is. Pause. Full pause. As in like, don't do it anymore kind of a pause. It's very, very weird. And I understand, like, it's off season. You need things to talk about, especially on social media. That is like peak off season content. How much bigger is Jaden Daniels? But it is weird. It's very, very weird. He said some more, it looks like, about that. So I want to get to, I'll play 7 here. Max, this is Jaden Daniels on if he had planned to bulk up this offseason.
Nah, I was just working out. It wasn't like I need to eat this amount much. No, it was just go out there, have a plan, and, naturally just put on weight.
It's funny what happens when you get an entire offseason under an NFL system. In college, you're in control. You're controlled in a lot of instances in college. The coach decides, and your coaches decide what you eat, when you eat it, all these sorts of things. When you go to class, if you go to class, depending on who you are, and certain whatever programs. Most of these guys taking online classes. There's a lot of different things, a lot of different decisions that go in. But when your entire job is to do the workouts, the eating, getting better at the playbook, getting better on the VR, all the things that Jaden Daniels, I'm sure, spent a lot of time doing, you will naturally get a little bigger. Here's the thing that he talked about that I think is actually the biggest deal of the things that he talked about. This is Jaden Daniels on Terry McLaurin's contract situation. Terry was not at OTAs yesterday. The contract situation is believed to be the reason for that. Here's Jaden Daniels on Terry's contract.
Me and Terry got a good relationship outside of football, so obviously he got to handle what he has to handle, and but that doesn't change anything. The fact that he's part of our brotherhood. We know Terry's working and everything, so we got to get better, and he knows he got to get better each and every day.
I am not worried about Terry McLaurin's contract situation at all, for the simple reason is that we have done this song and dance before. When you have seen the movie once, you already know how it's going to end. We've seen this movie before. Terry McLaurin wanted and deserved a new contract years ago, got a new contract, did this where he wasn't at OTAs. No holdout. It was not a holdout. You don't hold out of OTAs. That's not how OTAs work. They are voluntary. That's why I didn't do a whole spiel today on Marshawn Lattimore and Laramie Tunsil and Terry not being there. I would like them to be there, but it's not required for them to be there. It is voluntary. It would be better, I think, if guys like a Marshawn Lattimore, who did not end the season on the greatest note, or a guy like a Laramie Tunsil, who was rumored to have maybe some leadership shortcomings. It would be nice if they showed up to OTAs, but it's not a big deal if they don't. Not required. There are things that happen at our job here that are not required that we don't go to. Happens all the time. And to one all-hands meeting in my 4 years at this company. It's probably the only one I'm going to go to. Not required. Hey, we want you to be here. Not going to be here, right? So I'm not mad at that. But with Terry, we have seen this before in that same thing happened years ago. And what came out of it? He got a contract. And when he got a contract, he spoke about how much he loved it here. And then he went on to have 2 decent years, and then one really, really good year when he finally got a quarterback. I don't anticipate that is going to change at all. Once Terry gets his money, he is going to be here. He's going to show up, and then him and Jaden hopefully are going to top some of the things that they did last year. And what they did last year was some of the best success that a Washington wide receiver has had in franchise history here. So I am not worried about Terry McLaurin, and I do like it when a guy like Jaden Daniels, who whether he views himself as like this big, massive leader or not, knowing that he is, when he gets to a microphone and understanding that they are going to rather lift Terry McLaurin up, say he needs to handle what he's going to handle. We still love him. He's still part of the brotherhood. We know he's working hard. I think that we know he's working hard was a really crucial part to this conversation, to this sentence here by Jaden Daniels, because it effectively said we know that he is not just slacking. It's not like he's just on vacation. You know, Aaron Rodgers was supposed to be in OTAs last year. He went out of the country. Terry's not doing that. He's not in Egypt hanging out. He's still putting work in. He just is not around the team right now as the agent and the team work on the contract and get those things situated. And now it's just a question of what is that number going to be? I happen to think it's going to be at least 31. If DK Metcalf got 30.5, I think Terry McLaurin is going to get at least 31. If Ayuk got 30, McLaurin should get more than Ayuk. That's just the nature of what this position is. That's the nature of how contracts work in the NFL. One guy got X, I got to get Y. And it needs to be bigger, and it needs to be a little bit better. I need to maybe a no trade clause in there in some capacity. I happen to believe that if Terry McLaurin wants to be, Terry McLaurin should be a commander lifer. I don't think there should be a need to move on from him unless that contract is just heavily, heavily screwed on the back end. But I trust the dorks in the front office. Dorks said with a sign of respect. But if you got a bunch of Ivy Leaguers in there, you're going to flex these Ivy Leaguers. I'm going to call them dorks. I think the dorks in the front office is that if they get that money right, make sure it is a team friendly as the years progress. I think it'll be fine. And by the way, team friendly doesn't mean pay cut in this instance. Team friendly just means it is a contract that benefits the team as the contract goes on, the same way that it could benefit the player. If winning is the goal here, team-friendly contracts are going to be very, very essential throughout the years to make that happen. Still getting guys paid what they are deserved, just making it easier for the team to pay you what you deserve and to pay other people what they deserve to help you win and get this franchise back to glory. And then you and me and all of us can be celebrating on Independence Avenue. All right, that's it for me today. Chris Russell coming up next. I'm back with you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Excited for that show. We're going to have Rick Kamla on the program. Ben Standing will be on the program as well. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you at 10 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow. Chris Russell next on the Team 980.